Chapter 92, On the Train. Chapter 92, On the Train. Although Eru was very vigilant before, he was sleeping like a log now and didn't even realize what had happened. As though she was feeling guilty for Yemo, Wan Yen actually gave him $200 and said, "Brother, I know you had your money stolen before. This 200 is not much, but at least you can save it for an emergency." Yemo looked at this Wan Yen in surprise. She actually felt guilty for what happened before, and still had some conscience. At this moment, Eru also woke up. He looked at Yemo and Wan Yen, obviously not knowing what was going on. Yemo pushed the money back and smiled. "No need, I have money, I don't need yours." Wan Yen didn't expect Yemo to reject her offer. In her opinion, although Yemo was a bit better than Eru, he didn't really wear any famous brands either. It could only be said he was neat and tidy. Perhaps he would have an urgent use for his money later, but he just didn't know now. However, she became worried for Yemo rejecting her money. "I really saw your money being stolen, but I didn't dare to say anything at the time because I was scared of him taking revenge on me. Take these $200, otherwise, I would really feel guilty." She was speaking the truth this time because she had seen too many accounts of people reporting thieves and getting stabbed. "I said his money was stolen, but he didn't believe me. Now look, you saw it too. You have no money now, right? I'll give you $100 too. I'm still a student, so I don't have much money." At this moment, the girl who came over before had a bowl of noodles in her hands, and hearing Wan Yan's words, she also started to take out money. Hearing these two people's words, Eru seemed to understand that this young man had his money stolen. He didn't back out and also took out something covered in layers and layers of paper. Eventually, he took out 50 and said, "Brother, I don't have much money either, so I'll help you with 50. My grandpa said there were a lot of thieves outside and told me to be careful. Looks like that Jean Jibing was a thief." Yemo saw these three people were warm-hearted. Although he was a bit frustrated, he was still grateful. This world wasn't completely cold, especially Eru. Yemo saw that although he had a thick stack of money, they were all 50s. Although this person was slightly simple-minded, he was a great person. Yemo saw the situation and could only take Wan Yan's $200 and said to the other two, "I'll be fine with 200, take back your money." He could tell this girl was a student, she even said so herself, and Eru was obviously not wealthy. Although this woman in her 40s didn't wear any pricey brands and bought a bed ticket, she had obviously bought it purely to rest, meaning that she wasn't a wealthy person. Seeing Yemo accepting her money, Wan Yan was obviously relieved. She felt extremely guilty for simply watching the thief taking tens of thousands from Yemo but didn't dare to call him out. After Yemo had taken the money, he took out 3 herbs from his bag and gave them to Wan Yan. "I won't take your money for free, take these 3 herbs." The two women looked stunned at Yemo, wondering why she would want his herbs. However, Eru stared at these herbs that he had never seen before and wandered off in his mind. "Big brother, you're also a Chinese doctor?" Eru said, astonished. Yemo shook his head. "I'm not really a Chinese doctor. I just have some understanding of herbs and like to collect them." At this moment, Wan Yan reacted and quickly pushed the herbs away. "Big brother, I don't have any use for these things, take them back." Yemo smiled. "Other people might not have a use for these 3 herbs, but you do." "Why?" the girl asked, astonished. She had already been confused when Yemo gave the 3 herbs to Wan Yan, but now, she was even more confused when Yemo said this. Seeing that another person asked the question for her, Wan Yan didn't talk and wanted to see how Yemo would answer. "Because you still don't have children, you should know your condition better than anyone else. Take back these herbs and boil them 3 times. Remember not to add anything else, just these 3. It would be best if you drink the crumbs too, then you would be fine." Yemo could tell that Wan Yan had some problems with her body. Not only was she not able to give birth, but in the long run, she would barely be able to live for another 20 years at most. He found these herbs in the borderline of Vietnam, and still had some remaining. Normal people wouldn't know its use because these 3 had to be consumed at the same time. To be honest, he was missing a herb that replenished the essence of the body, But Yemo saw that Wan Yan's body was quite sturdy, so although she may suffer a little, it shouldn't be a problem. However, before she could drink this, he still needed to use his qi to help wash her meridians. Ah! You really can tell that I have. Wan Yan took the 3 herbs excitedly with her hands shaking. Suddenly, she bowed down many times to Yemo but still couldn't say anything. She had been married more than 10 years but just wasn't able to conceive a child. Not only was his mother-in-law's family looking down on her, but even her neighbors were insulting her. Even though she had looked at many places and spent a lot of money, she still couldn't solve the problem, and although her husband still loved her, she didn't feel good herself. The frustrated Wan Yan spent all her time on business, running day and night tirelessly. Now that someone said her disease could be cured so simply, how could she not be happy? She was so excited that she couldn't talk anymore. She was already 39, and after another 2 years, she would truly start to feel hopeless. But soon she reacted and took out a card from her bag. This is a bank card, there aren't much inside, but it's my way to thank you, the password. Yemo couldn't say anything, so he stopped the conversation. Keep the card, I have enough money. Besides, how do you know that I'm not trying to cheat you? Then Yemo with extreme speed grabbed Wan Yan's wrist and helped her unlock her meridians without anybody noticing. At this moment, Wan Yan still hadn't realized what was happening, so she just took back the card and suddenly thought, yeah, what if he's a fraud? But then, why would he say it out loud? However, the frauds nowadays have a lot of tricks, and some even pretend to be generous. Who knows? After thinking for a while, Wan Yan took back the card. Big brother, how about you leave your number with me? If this can really cure my condition, I must repay you. Yemo waved his hand. I don't have a phone, and there's no need for repayment. Furthermore, since you have already paid for these 3 herbs, there's no need for anything else. Big brother, your medical skills are so great, you don't even need to check her meridians, and you could tell her condition. Even my grandpa isn't as skilled as you. Era suddenly said. Yemo said, Eru, you are a Chinese doctor, and I think that you're quite a good person. Would you like to pursue a career with me in Luotsang? I plan to open a clinic, and if you want you can help me out. Of course I do. I don't have any good place to go anyway. Seeing that Yemo invited him, the lost Eru agreed without hesitation. At this moment, Wan Yan also calmed down. She looked at Yemo and then at Eru, but couldn't be sure if Yemo was a fraud. However, Yemo helped her before, so although she didn't know if these few herbs were real, she couldn't say much. The girl saw that Yemo was a doctor as well and admired him. Now that Yemo said he was going Luotsang, she immediately said, I'm also going to Luotsang, we can go together then. Wait, I'll carry my stuff here. Fine, we can help each other with more people. Yemo didn't mind this girl taking the train with them. Although this girl wasn't very pretty, she had a good heart, and she looked decent too. Besides, she had wanted to help Yemo before. I'll help you carry things. Era was a very gentle person, and now that they were familiar with each other, he actually just left his bag on the bed and was going to help the girl carry her things. Just then, he had said that his grandpa told him that there were a lot of thieves outside, yet now just after one conversation, he was already very trustful toward Yemo. Yemo nodded and said, Just go, I'll look after your stuff. However, Wan Yan looked complicatedly at the 3 and went back to her bed. She didn't talk anymore but was contemplating whether she should boil the herbs Yemo gave her or not. Soon, the girl moved her stuff over. It was just a case and a bag. This girl was very talkative and enjoyed a conversation with Yemo and Eru. However, Wan Yan didn't talk much, as if something was on her heart. From their conversation, Yemo learned that this girl was still studying in Luotsang at the Jiangnan Medical University. Her name was Yang Yi, she was in her 3rd year and was specializing in practical medicine. The 3 enjoyed a good conversation and soon, the train had reached Beijing. Wan Yan bid the 3 farewell and quickly got off the train. After the train had arrived at Jingstate, the 3 got off the train and changed their train to Luotsang. However, believing that Yemo had lost all his money, Yang Yi insisted on buying a ticket for Yemo. In the end, Yemo had no choice but to take out a stack of 10,000, telling her that his money wasn't stolen. Only then did Yang Yi back down. There weren't any accidents when buying the tickets, and the three only used about half an hour time to get on the train from Jing State to Luotsang. This time, there were no beds but only chairs, and Yu Era had insisted on paying his own ticket, so Yemo didn't stop him. "Brother Mo, I heard that you need some certificate to practice medicine in the big cities. If we start a clinic in Luotsang, will we be checked?" Yu Era seemed to not know how the world worked and had been simply instilled some simple knowledge before he had left. "Of course, you need a certificate, otherwise you would be judged as a fraudulent doctor." Before Yemo could reply, Yang Yi answered. Yemo knew that he needed this, but now, as long as he had money, any certificate was easy to make and wasn't too worried. "Brother Mo and Eru, you both don't have a phone. How will I contact you later on?" Yang Yi got along well with Yemo and Yu Eru, but she was the only one to have a phone out of the three and saw that Yemo was definitely someone who wouldn't take the initiative to call another, so she asked. "When Brother Mo and I have found a place to stay, we'll call you." Yu Eru had a good impression of Yang Yi. "Okay, Eru, you must remember to call me. I don't have any people I know in Luotsang. Knowing you and Brother Mo will make things easier when I need help in the future," Yang Yi said half-jokingly. For Yang Yi, although Yemo looked a little ugly with a mark on his face, she felt comfortable talking to him and stayed with him. The three got to know each other better and better as they traveled, and, after a few hours, the train finally arrived at the Luotsang station. Yemo and Yu Eru arranged to meet up in the future with Yang Yi and separated at the station. Chapter 93. Do you think you can leave? Chapter 93. Do you think you can leave? Ninghai. For a few days, Ning Qingxue, who couldn't rest properly, finally calmed down. Whether it was the TV or the online news, they showed that the perpetrator of the case a few days ago had already fled Ninghai, and now, the police patrol in Ninghai had obviously calmed down. All these signs had meant that Yemo had really left Ninghai. "Su Wei, I want to leave a few days. Can you look after the flowers I had planted here, especially this smallest one?" Ning Qingxue was just talking to Su Wei when Li Mumei came from Su Jingwen's place. Hearing Ning Qingxue's words, Li Mumei was immediately rejoicing. "Qingxue, you want to go back to Yu State?" However, Ning Qingxue shook her head. "No, I just want to go out by myself and ease my feelings, and it's too boring staying at Ninghai all the time." She didn't even tell Li Mumei where she was going. "Qingxue, aren't you going back to Yu State? How about I go with you?" Li Mumei immediately felt things weren't right after hearing Ning Qingxue's words. After all, Ning Qingxue had never been to other places alone, so where would she be going? Su Wei already knew that Ning Qingxue's identity wasn't ordinary, and she seemed to have something weird going on with Yemo, and although she never asked about it, she was still able to tell. And now, Ning Qingxue wanted to go out, and even asked her to look after the flowers. It was not that she had a problem with it, and besides, she knew that this grass was very important to Ning Qingxue. As for why, she had no idea. Li Mumei saw Ning Qingxue didn't want to say where she was going, so she could only sigh and stopped asking. 2 days later, Ning Qingxue was finally ready to go, and just reminded Su Wei again to look after the grass for her before she left Ninghai. It wasn't convenient for her to carry Yemo's case, but she didn't feel safe leaving it at Ninghai, so she could only put the contents in a bag. As for those 3 beads, Ning Qingxue hadn't been able to find a string good enough to connect them, so she could only put them in the bag. She wanted to find the prettiest string and connect these beads before putting it on her wrist. But now, she wasn't able to find one, so she could only store it away. The reason she left Ninghai was that the last time Xiaolei came, she said that she had met Yemo in Flowing Snake. So, Ning Qingxue wanted to check there since, in her opinion, Xiaolei saw Yemo in Flowing Snake, so it meant that Yemo could quite possibly go back there again. She had done her research, and Flowing Snake was a place close to the border, a very chaotic location and good for escaping. Although she had thought more than once that Flowing Snake was too dangerous, she reminded herself that if it hadn't been for Emo, she would have been long dead. So what if she died again? Besides, she also understood that if she didn't actively look for Emo and just stayed in Ninghai, perhaps she wouldn't be able to see Emo in her lifetime. She had a feeling that Emo wouldn't come looking for her. Although she didn't know why Emo came back to Ninghai last time, she was sure that Emo didn't come for her. She noticed that her feelings for Emo were getting more and more complicated. Initially, she had only wanted to use him, then she felt guilty and wanted to apologize and compensate him. However, afterward she was hurt while protecting the grass, and it was Emo that treated her. She felt grateful toward him and even wanted to live with him like this for the rest of her life. But she felt that the more she understood him, the farther away she was from him. She was becoming a stranger to him, yet she wanted to understand him more. There wasn't a direct trip to Guilin from Ninghai, but there was a flight to the Xian Mountain, and from there, Ning Qingxue could go directly to Guilin. Nothing troublesome happened from Ninghai to Guilin. However, after arriving there, Ning Qingxue realized that she couldn't even find a ride to Flowing Snake. No matter how much money she offered, no one wanted to take her to Flowing Snake, and most of them even tried to persuade her that a girl like her shouldn't go to Flowing Snake by herself. However, Ning Qingxue was determined to go there, so in the end, she had no choice but to go to a rental company and rent a Volkswagen. She was ready to drive herself to Flowing Snake. Although a ride to Flowing Snake was very hard to find, the route could be easily asked for. After 2 hours, Ning Qingxue's car had gone into the twisted mountain paths, and she realized that she hadn't even gone half the way through, but it was already 5 p.m. After another bumpy 2 hours, Ning Qingxue realized that the roads started to become flatter, and it was more desolate around. The howls of beasts could be heard from time to time, and the wind was blowing crazily on the trees. Being anxious, Ning Qingxue drove faster and faster. "Big brother, I didn't think there would be a car this late, should we move?" In a patch of forest that Ning Qingxue could not see, a few pair of eyes were already gazing at her. The man called Big Brother waved his hand and said, "No need, we still have other business tonight. Plus, a person who drives this model probably doesn't have much loot anyway. And that Fong Nan's reach is really extensive now, there's no need to expose us for this type of car." Ning Qingxue would never imagine that she had avoided a disaster just because of the model of car she was driving. When she finally arrived in Flowing Snake, it was already around 9 p.m. The fatigued Ning Qingxue carried her bag and prepared to find a place to stay for the night, and look for Yemo's news tomorrow. Flowing Snake was not without its hotels, but they were mostly for those bandits or merchants at the borderline, and those who are able to do illegal business here weren't normal people. These hotels not only had a place to live but also provided a bar for people to drink downstairs. So as soon as Ning Qingxue walked into the nearest hotel, she immediately attracted the eyes of almost everyone in the hotel. Flowing Snake did have a few women, but this was the first time that a girl who was as white, young, and beautiful came. Those who could survive in Flowing Snake had their heads in their hands, and these people were drunk almost every day. So as soon as they saw Ning Qingxue, all the people set their gazes on Ning Qingxue's body, even the 2 women that were there. Ning Qingxue looked at the countless eyes of hungry wolves and felt cold shivering uncontrollably. As though seeing Ning Qingxue shiver, a 30-year-old man sitting at the bar had lights shining out of his eyes. He carried a cup and walked over. "Girl, you're staying overnight? Don't worry, with me here, no one would dare to hurt you. Boss, get me the best room for this girl, it's on me." As soon as this man came over and talked, a lot of people immediately went quiet. Their lustful eyes also had some sympathy. Everyone knew that this person was called Shui. In fact, he has another title, Echidna. Not only was he cruel, but very hard to deal with because even Fong Nan couldn't do anything about the power behind him. Most importantly, this person was extremely lustful, and countless girls died at his hands. "No need, I'm going to another place." Ning Qingxue turned back and was about to leave. "Do you think you can leave? Girl, don't get cocky with me." Shui saw Ning Qingxue with a pale face wanting to leave, so he immediately threw his cup on the ground and folded his arms, standing at the door staring coldly at Ning Qingxue. Chapter 94: The Dragon Crossing the River and the Local Snake. Chapter 94: The Dragon Crossing the River and the Local Snake. On her way over here, Ning Qingxue hadn't really met any bandits and thought Xiao Lei had been exaggerating since, although this was the border, it shouldn't be so chaotic. However, now she realized how chaotic Flowing Snake was. She had been harassed in public, and yet no one even tried to put some restraints on that man. "I'll give you 3 seconds, pour some wine for me and repent, or I'll strip you here and *CK you." Shi Wei never had the patience to wait for a woman. For him, women were only for men to use. Ning Qingxue looked at the room full of cold glares and this Shi Wei's ferocious complexion with a pale face and her heart shaking. Even if she died, she didn't want to be our pet here. Furthermore, she hadn't even met Yemo yet. Ning Qingxue, who had never been in contact with the dark side of the world, finally understood what unreasonable meant. She had thought that she was mature, but some things had to be encountered before one knew of its terror. "I'm looking for my husband Yemo, he's in Flowing Snake, you can't touch me." Even Ning Qingxue felt that her tone was pale and weak. She just heard Xiao Lei had been saved by Yemo here, so she said his name out loud to see if anyone knew him. "Ha ha ha, your husband will be me from now on, what Yemo? If he's in Flowing Snake, I will make him disappear." Shi Wei laughed cockily and actually reached out his hand to grab Ning Qingxue. Extreme disgust flashed across Ning Qingxue as she dodged aside once again. *CK. Shi Wei was completely angry this time. There had not been a woman who dared to reject him. But today, this woman rejected him multiple times, making him lose a lot of face. "Wait, Brother Wei! Can you listen to a word of mine?" A young man in his 20s suddenly walked over and said. Everyone looked with surprise at this person who had dared to disturb Shi Wei at this moment. Did he want to die? But when people saw who this was, no one added another word. The person who came up was called Rock, Fang Nan's personal guard. Although Flowing Snake wasn't 100% the land of the Pu Dao clan, there were no gangs who could rival them ever since the Vietnamese gang and the Philippines gang had been annihilated. Most people who came to Flowing Snake for business would give some respect to this local snake, the Pu Dao clan. Although Shi Wei was extremely unhappy being interrupted, he still knew Rock. This young man had always been beside Fang Nan and had some power in the Pu Dao clan, so although he was a dragon crossing the river, he didn't want to overdo it. He had no choice but to say, "Brother Rock, if you have anything to say, please do, but I'm having this woman for sure. Hopefully you can explain fast so I can go about my business." Although his tone was slightly polite, that arrogance was undeniably there. Obviously, although he respected Rock a little, he was not afraid of the Pu Dao clan. Rock's face changed but didn't argue back as he knew Shi Wei's origin. He could not only live well in Flowing Snake but many places at the border because he was a powerful person from the amphibian gang. For the amphibian gang, the Pu Dao clan could barely be called a local snake because the amphibian clan was the greatest clan at the border. Their activities were located at the borders of the Asian countries and did lucrative business. It was said that the amphibian gang belonged to Nangqing, and those part of the eastern underground world would shiver at the mention of this name. Flowing Snake was just a small stop for them. The consequences were imaginable if they offended the amphibian gang. So even when Shi Wei wasn't too polite to Rock, he didn't dare to say anything. "If I may ask, you said that your husband was named Yemo. Which Yemo are you talking about?" Rock came to the door and asked. He knew that Shi Wei was very impetuous. Just when Ning Qingxue didn't know what to do anymore, someone came to ask her. She immediately felt like she was someone who was about to drown but managed to grab a hold of a floating block of wood. It wasn't that she was afraid of death since she had already died once, but losing her loyalty was more horrifying than death. Otherwise, she wouldn't be throwing a fret about being looked at last time when she was treated by Yemo. When Rock asked, she replied immediately, "I came to look for my husband Yemo. He came to Flowing Snake before. I knew from my friend and came to look for him." Then, Ning Qingxue described Yi Mo's appearance. Hearing Ning Qingxue's words, Rock was already sure that Ning Qingxue was talking about Brother Yi. It was not surprising, only Brother Yi would have such a beautiful wife. However, Rock knew Shi Wei's character and turned around to his follower. Tell Brother Nan that Brother Ye's wife came. What do you mean? Shi Wei felt quite obviously that Rock's words weren't right. It didn't seem like he planned on giving her to him. Sorry, Brother Shi, this woman belongs to our Brother Yi, you can't touch her. Then, Rock waved his hand, and 3 of his henchmen came up. Shi Wei's face sunk. This means that you're acting against me. Does Fan Nan not want to stay here anymore? I'm telling you, I'm having this woman today, and even if Fan Nan comes, I will still take her. Brothers, take this woman away! As soon as Shi Wei had spoken, the 4 tattooed youth, who were originally just standing at the side watching, immediately charged up. Rock's face changed, and after a moment's hesitation, he waved his hand and his henchmen also came. The 2 sides immediately formed a dichotomy. A mere follower like you dare to take my woman. Do you really think I don't dare to do anything to you? Wait until I break your leg and ask for an explanation from Fan Nan. Brothers, attack! Shi Wei's words were full of ferociousness and cruelty. With Shi Wei's order, the 2 sides immediately started fighting. The hack swords they hid in their clothes were all taken out and immediately, blood spilled everywhere at this hotel. Ning Qingxue retreated to the door in a panic. At this moment, she truly realized just how chaotic it was here. There was a crowd of people hacking at each other, but no one came to manage the situation. Because Rock had fewer people, they were quickly on the losing side, but just when Shi Wei wanted to drag Ning Qingxue away and leave, another 20 people suddenly came to the door. Fan Nan's furious voice sounded. Beat these bastards to the death. Fan Nan, you dare to touch me? Do you not want to live anymore? Hearing Fan Nan's words, Shi Wei was worried and angry. He didn't think that the boss of a small place dared to touch him since he was comparable to an ambassador of a big nation to a small country here. Although the local snakes here didn't have to circle him, they wouldn't offend him for a woman. I don't mind you taking some benefits from my domain, but you dare to touch Brother Ye's woman. Do you want to die? Beat him hard. Fan Nan knew the consequences of offending Shi Wei, but he was already respecting Emo like a god, and this woman was his wife. How would he let other people touch her? Not only that, he was going to show his attitude for Ning Qingxue to see, otherwise he wouldn't be able to explain himself to Emo. Chapter 95. The Second Beautiful Lady Who Comes to Flowing Snake. Chapter 95. The second beautiful lady who comes to Flowing Snake. With the men Fan Nan had brought, Shi Wei didn't have the slightest ability to resist before having one leg broken. However, Fan Nan didn't dare to kill him. Although he didn't need to be held responsible legally for his death, the amphibious gang was too strong. If he had killed Shi Wei, there would only be a war between the two. The reason he broke Shi Wei's leg was mainly to show some respect to Ning Qingxue. Take your men and P*SS off immediately. Fan Nan didn't hesitate to kick out Shi Wei. In this flowing snake, his words still had power. Although Shi Wei was extremely angry, he couldn't do anything about it in Flowing Snake. If Fan Nan told him to leave, that was the only thing he could do. Even if he wanted his revenge, he had to wait until he reported the incident here with exaggeration. Shi Wei took his few men and left this hotel. They just swapped for another one but didn't leave Flowing Snake. One reason was that it was already late, and he had a broken leg, so they had nowhere else to go. Another one was that even if Fan Nan knew that he hadn't left Flowing Snake, Fan Nan wouldn't go look for him. Fan Nan indeed knew that Shi Wei hadn't left Flowing Snake, but he didn't dare to do things over the top. If it was regarding the incident with Ning Qingxue, he had the rights to. But if he were to kick Shi Wei out of Flowing Snake, then he wouldn't have any justification. If he was stronger, then it didn't matter if he was being unreasonable or not. But no matter how strong he was, he wouldn't be stronger than the amphibious clan. Ning Qingxue stared dumbfoundedly at the fight that had started because of her. It started fast and finished fast and left a ground full of blood. She didn't think that Emo had such loyal friends in Flowing Snake. She felt more confused about Emo, who spent his time growing flowers all day long. Then, she thought about how Song Shaoan and Song Xiaoan were killed by him, plus what she had seen today. It seemed that what Xiao Lei had told her was true. Emo really had great capabilities. Then why did she hear in Beijing that Emo was a completely useless human being? Fan Nan saw Ning Qingshue's face and was stunned, as he thought that only someone like Brother Yi could have such a wife. This woman was a bit too beautiful. However, Fan Nan respectfully transferred Ning Qingshu to another special place and told her the things about Emo and Flowing Snake. He even didn't hide the fact that Emo had annihilated 2 clans. In his view, Ning Qingshu was Yemo's wife, so she must have already known about what Emo had done. The more Ning Qingshu heard, the more astonished she was. She didn't think that Emo had done so much in Flowing Snake in such a short period of time. He had beaten the bosses here to be respectful of him. However, what made Ning Qingshu disappointed was that Emo didn't come back and seemed to have gone somewhere else. Ning Qingshu suddenly felt a little lonely sleeping at this borderline fort in Flowing Snake. She didn't know why she came to find Emo. From the start, Emo was just helping her. Even the marriage was fake. Did she love him, or was it because of something else? What if she really did find Emo? What should she say? Was she going to say, "Sorry, I shouldn't have treated you like that before," and then no matter what Emo replied, she would go back to her own life? Ning Qingshu suddenly felt lost. Love? What was love? Regardless of whether she loved Emo, was she going to find someone else to marry afterward? She had no intentions of divorce after marrying with Emo, but was she supposed to find Emo and tell him that she didn't want to divorce? Was that all? Ning Qingshu sighed. The more she thought that she understood Emo, the more she was confused, which was very contradictory. Although she didn't understand Emo very much, she felt that out of all the people she had met, no one was as magnanimous as him, and perhaps he was the one she needed. Originally, she had a skewed view of Emo, probably because she didn't really understand him. After he was gone, she didn't divorce, and perhaps at that time, she had subconsciously agreed to be his wife. But before this, she had to find him. Otherwise, if Emo marries one day while she still calls herself his wife, then that would be too ridiculous. Ning Qingshu had her principles. Although she was willing to marry Emo, she wasn't someone to cry and beg for the marriage if Emo didn't want her. Ning Qingshu twisted and turned in the sleepless night. Just when she slept for a while, the day was bright already. She didn't meet Emo in Flowing Snake, and thus no longer had the intention to stay anymore. But before she left, she wanted to see that pagoda where Emo lived at. Although it had all collapsed, Fang Nan had sent people to rebuild it. Ning Qingshu wanted to see where Emo lived before, so Fang Nan brought a few henchmen and went with her himself. Flowing Snake was so chaotic, he didn't want Emo's wife to have more troubles here. If this sort of thing happened, he wouldn't be able to say anything to Emo. Not to mention Emo saved his life before and helped him get back the ruling authority here. Besides, Emo was not hesitant in killing, and his gang didn't even have enough people for Emo to kill. Ever since she had done her last mission, Qi Wanqing no longer had the mood to stay in the military. Every few days she would call Luo Tsang and ask her cousin, Zhu Man, if Emo went over. But each time, she received a disappointing answer. Emo didn't go to the company her cousin managed in Luotsang. Chapter 96. The Old Ginger Song Yuani. Chapter 96. The Old Ginger Song Yuani. Of course, Qi Wanqing knew how chaotic Flowing Snake was and wasn't even planning on talking with those hoodlum-looking people. She wasn't like Ning Qingshu. The things she had learned in the military weren't for show. She immediately kicked the 2 men who didn't even take her seriously and were kicked to the ground, and she didn't stop here. She went up and kicked twice again. Everyone could even hear the sound of bones cracking. Shi Wei was very annoyed that the women he had seen today dared to resist, but before he was able to release his anger, he found that his 2 men had their leg broken by Qi Wanqing. Before he was able to scream, Qi Wanqing kicked again right on his leg that had been just plastered. Sure Wei's howl could be heard almost a mile away, but in a place like Flowing Snake, no matter how much you screamed, no one would come and see. The remaining 2 men carrying Sure Wei were already shaking. They had never seen a woman with such strong power who didn't even hesitate when fighting. There were a few youths who had seen Qi Wanqing in the distance and wanted to harass her, but they immediately backed off after seeing this scene. This woman dared to beat Sure Wei. How could she care about them? In fact, if Sure Wei had immediately chosen to send all of his men to attack Qi Wanqing at the same time, perhaps Qi Wanqing would have some trouble, but only 2 went first, and these 2 had such a whimsical attitude that the result could be expected. However, even if Sure Wei took it seriously at the start, Qi Wanqing wouldn't mind. At most, she would have released Little Wolf, but if she did, people would die. Although Qi Wanqing knew how chaotic this place was, she didn't want to kill people so easily. Amidst the howls, Sure Wei didn't think the second beautiful girl would be so troublesome. Sure Wei, who was under unbearable pain, saw that this woman didn't seem like she wanted to punish him more, so he resisted the pain and called out, "Leave quickly!" Qi Wanqing saw them leave but didn't care. She was prepared to ask someone, but unexpectedly, the person who walked up toward her was a woman even prettier than her. However, this woman had a few men following behind her and appeared to be the leader of a gang. Was the head of Flowing Snake a woman? However, this woman didn't seem to dress like that. She seemed more like a docile, well-educated girl. No matter what, it was better to face a woman than a man. Thinking about this, Qi Wanqing walked toward this woman. She wanted to ask about Yemo. When Ning Qingxue first saw Qi Wanqing, she felt that something was strange but couldn't say what it was. However, it felt very real. Didn't they say that Flowing Snake was chaotic? How come such a pretty woman, not one bit inferior to me, is here? She was startled. Fan Nan and several of his men were accompanying Ning Qingxue, who went to see the pagoda, and when they saw that breathtaking woman, they started to wonder what was going on recently in this place, since 2 women of such caliber came consecutively in 2 days. Fortunately, they hadn't seen Qi Wanqing kicking the other men, or their impressions would have been different. "Hello, do you know if a man named Yemo is here?" Qi Wanqing asked as she blocked Ning Qingxue's group. "You are also looking for him." Ning Qingxue was surprised as she looked at the woman in front of her. She was charming, yet had the look of a martial artist. It was not surprising that she had such a strange feeling earlier, almost as if she had a sixth sense. "You are?" Qi Wanqing looked curiously at Ning Qingxue, wondering what Yi Mo's relationship was with such an excellent woman. "Oh, she's called Ning Qingxue, Brother Ye's wife." Fan Nan saw the atmosphere was awkward, and obviously, this handsome-looking girl also knew Yi Mo, so he quickly introduced her. Meanwhile, he thought, "Brother Yi is indeed strong. Even the girls he knew aren't ordinary." "Huh, you're Brother Ye's wife?" "That," Qi Wanqing managed to hold back. "One who used Brother Yi as a shield." However, she no longer had a good impression of Ning Qingxue. Ning Qingxue also seemed to notice that she had some enmity toward her, and didn't know what to say anymore. She didn't even ask what she was to Yemo, as she was scared that she wouldn't be able to handle the result. The atmosphere was awkward once again. Even Fan Nan could tell what was happening. The 2 seemed to have a conflict over Brother Yi, and he was immediately worried. Both of these women seemed to be related to Brother Yi, so it was not good to help either of them. One seemed to be the legal and the other the hidden. He couldn't let them stare off like this. If they had a fight, he would be the one to suffer. Thinking about this, Fan Nan wiped the sweat from his forehead and said, It's already noon, and we're all starving. Why don't we go eat first? We can talk about Brother Yi after food." He was the gang leader and always lived his life on the edge, but now, it was really hard for him to be the peacekeeper between 2 women. Other than Qi Wanqing and Ning Qingxue looking for Yemo, the Song family was also discussing about Yemo. Although all sorts of signs indicated that Song Xiaotan's death was related to Yemo, it was not surprising that he could kill Song Xiaotan. However, it would be shocking if he could actually kill Hu Qiu. Thus, the Song family still couldn't be sure that Song Xiaotan was killed by Yemo. Can we confirm that the Shering who suddenly appeared in Ninghai and disappeared is Emo? The Song family had 2 of their 3rd-generation children murdered, so Song Qiming's anger could no longer be described. Although Song Shaoan was his son, Song Xiaotan was the brightest one in the 3rd generation, yet he was killed in Ninghai. We can't be sure yet because even though he looks quite similar to Emo, the face of Shering is too blurred. The main thing is, Shi Ying's power is definitely higher than Hu Qiu. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to beat Pu Dongheng in one move. The greatest point of suspicion is that Fan Weiqing first saw Shering at Ningdu district, and that's where Emo was living at the time. Song Hai reported every detail of his investigation. It doesn't matter whether Shering is Emo or not, he has a great connection to Xiaotan's death. Besides, Shering kills with metal nails, and up until now, we haven't found any ancient martial arts family that likes to kill with metal nails. The old man who spoke was 50 or so, Song Qishan. He was called Uncle Shin. His status was just below Old Man Song and Song Qiming. Although Song Qiming was the leader of the family in this meeting, his status wasn't the highest. Old Man Song, also known as Song Yuanyi, was the real leader. Old Man Song could stay calm if Song Shaoan died because even though Shaoan was his direct descendant, he didn't have much of a future. However, concerning Song Xiaotan, it was different. It was the grandson he had the most hopes for, but now that he was dead, Old Man Song could no longer be indifferent. Normally, he rarely came to the family meetings, but today, he came. Although he was full of rage, he still appeared to be composed. After hearing these few people, Song Yuanyi opened his closed eyes and said, "Continue to investigate the relationship between Shering and Emo. But we're only investigating, stop the hunt for Emo for now." When everyone looked confusedly at Old Man Song, he said plainly, "It doesn't matter whether we have Emo or Shi Ying's location, we just need to think of a way to make Qianlong to know." Emo had already raised the attention of that Yi family. What you need to do is to let Qianlong Tu know that Emo killed his son. After pausing for a bit, Old Man Song continued, "And you need to let the Yi family know Emo's excellence, but don't reveal that Emo possibly killed Qianlong Tu's only son. Other than that, we just need to enjoy the show. Besides, could it be so simple to kill Hu Qiu?" Near the end, Song Yuanyi's tone grew bleak. Everyone understood the old man's intentions and couldn't help to think that the oldest gingers were the spiciest. Making Qianlong Tu deal with the Yi family, and at the crucial moment, all the Song family had to do was give it a push. The old man's intentions were to use this opportunity to completely smash the Yi family to a point where they would never be able to recover. Of course, Emo didn't know that 2 women had been looking for him in Flowing Snake, and he didn't know the shenanigans that the Song family was using against the Yi family. Even if he knew, he would pretend he didn't know since he had no relationship with the Yi family anymore. He had opened his little clinic but was still operating without a license. Not only was the position far off the center of the city, but there were only him and Yu Era now. He chose this distant place because other places were too expensive, but the main reason was that this place was in an old private house, and when Emo rented the old house, he had paid for 2 years' rent. There was a yard in the back of the house where he could grow silver heart grass, which was exactly what Emo wanted. For him, business came after growing the silver heart grass. However, the 3rd day that the clinic had opened, they had their first patient when they least expected. Emo and Yuera were awoken by a hurried knock in the middle of the night. Chapter 97 First Patient. Chapter 97 First Patient. A 5-year-old kid was carried inside. Not only were his eyes tightly shut and his face was pale, but his body was also convulsing. "Doctor, please save my son! The ambulance is coming, but they still need 20 minutes before they get here. I'm afraid my Zangson won't last more than 10 minutes. As soon as Yueru opened the door, a middle-aged woman carried a small child inside screaming for help. Following close behind was a middle-aged man. His face was also showing how worried he was. Other than these 2, there was also a woman in her 50s behind them. Emo wondered if the whole family had come. The child probably had a relapse in his condition and needed to go to the hospital. However, the ambulance could only arrive 20 minutes later, and the family was afraid that his condition would worsen before the 20 minutes, so they came to this clinic trying to save the child's life for now. They were doing all they could in this time of crisis. Master! Although Yi Era learned Chinese medicine from his grandpa, he realized under Yimo's tutelage that his medical skills were far superior to his grandpa, so he called Yimo Master. Yimo was prepared to teach Yu Era medicine, so he didn't stop him from calling him Master. The condition of the child now was obviously out of Yu Era's range of ability. Yimo walked over and said to that woman, "Put your child on the bed." The woman was panicking now, so hearing Yimo's words, she immediately put the child on the bed and didn't even try to ask Yimo any questions. Seeing that the child on the bed, Yimo took out his silver needles and was about to use them. "Wait, what do you want to do? We just want you to gain some time for the child to wait for an ambulance. Why are you taking out the needle for?" The middle-aged man had come back to his senses as he looked at the needles. They were originally so worried that they tried to get all the help they could get. From his child convulsing to now, it had already been a few minutes, but he was calmer now, yet the doctor of a small street-side clinic was going to use needles on his child, so he immediately reacted. This was only a clinic that opened a few days ago, and he didn't even see a certificate here. Yimo stopped the needle in his hand and looked indifferently at the middle-aged man and didn't talk. For him, since the child was brought here, he didn't mind saving the child. But if the parents didn't even believe in him, he didn't need to mind others' business. He was a cultivator. Although he had spent quite some time on Earth, he still didn't weight the lives of normal people very much. However, he wasn't a heartless person either, so he would help if he could. When people believed that his money had been stolen on the train, they immediately came to help him, so he felt that he should also help other people. However, it was impossible for him to beg to treat this child. He had already scanned the child with his spirit sense. It wasn't a simple heart condition. His arteries were close to the bursting point, and if they fully exploded, this child wouldn't last long. Yimo understood the medical level here, and currently, the child's condition was incurable in this world. Seeing that Yimo stopped his hand, the middle-aged man didn't know what to say and was frozen. "Since you don't trust me, please leave." Yimo took back the silver needles. This set had been brought over by Yu Era. Yu Era had often been with his grandpa treating patients before. He really didn't like those people who didn't trust in the doctor, so as he saw the situation, he immediately said, "You are lucky that my master can help to treat your child, so..." Every time he and his grandpa went out to treat patients, people would be overjoyed and treated them with great hospitality. So why were they treated like this here? "Do you want Zangson to be like this forever? Move over!" After saying that, the woman pushed the man aside and suddenly kneeled down in front of Yimo. "Doctor, please save Zangson. He was already like this last time, and if we hadn't been right outside the hospital at that time, he would have lost his life. Please!" Her intentions were very simple. The doctor didn't even ask about the condition and took out the needle to treat Zangson, which meant that he really had a great ability. Otherwise, he should be asking about his conditions at least. Furthermore, she had heard that those doctors who used acupuncture were usually very able since ordinary doctors didn't know how to use it. Yemo waved his hand and said, "Get up, I'll look at your child for you, but you're affecting my treatment by kneeling there." Hearing Yemo's words, the woman quickly got up. The man who was pushed aside by the woman saw the child's face go from white to purple and immediately realized that the child was in danger. However, the ambulance still hadn't arrived yet, so he didn't speak anymore. That older woman stared at the child soullessly and probably didn't even know what to say anymore. Yemo, however, quickly pierced the needle into the child's body. He didn't even need to take the child's clothes off. These people didn't understand acupuncture, so they didn't know that usually, the clothes needed to be taken off. However, Yu Era understood it a bit, but in his opinion, Yemo was already capable, so it didn't matter to him if the clothes weren't taken off. Of course, Yemo didn't use traditional acupuncture. He was using the needles as a bridge to pass his qi into the child's body and gradually ease the damaged arteries. This wasn't a complete treatment, otherwise he would have to repair the arteries. Yemo wouldn't dare to treat it now, whether he were able to or not. If such a troublesome condition was treated by his small clinic, he would no longer be able to keep a low profile like he wanted to. However, if he eased the condition, that would still be reasonable, so he shouldn't attract too much attention. In order to completely treat this condition, Yemo had to first reach the third stage, then use many other herbs. As Yemo used his qi, the dead arteries in the child's body were gradually recovering their functions. The purple on his skin was continuously fading and, after 10 minutes, the child's face returned to normal. Even those who didn't understand medicine could tell that the child was getting better. The man and woman were overwhelmed with joy and came up to grab the child's hand. Meanwhile, Yemo was left to the side. At this moment, the siren of the ambulance could be heard. Finally, the couple remembered that their child was saved by Yemo and hurried over to thank him. Yemo waved his hand. "The ambulance is here, take your child to the hospital." Despite knowing that the hospital couldn't cure this disease completely, it would be good to get a checkup. The couple didn't dare to waste time and took the child into the ambulance. They didn't even have time to pay the fees. Qi Wanqing and Ning Qingxue, who were in Flowing Snake, had understood now that both of them didn't know where Yemo went. From Ning Qingxue's mouth, Qi Wanqing understood that Yemo had offended the Song family, which shocked her quite a bit. Although her grandpa was a soldier, and so was her father, compared to the Song family, they were far off. "Wanqing, what do you mean Yemo could have possibly gone to the desert?" Hearing Qi Wanqing's words, Ning Qingxue had completely believed that Yemo wasn't an ordinary person, even though she didn't understand why Yemo was pretending to be a normal person and was even kicked out of the Yi family. "I feel that he is definitely going there. I was by his side at the time when he found that ragged goatskin map, and I helped him interpret the Tibetan words on it. His expression at the time was very joyful. My guess is that he is probably looking for something there," Qi Wanqing said with certainty. Ning Qingxue believed Qi Wanqing's words. Yemo's actions were weird, regardless whether it was not sleeping at night but sitting under a tree, or sleeping on the stone floor. This wasn't something that could be explained normally. She was so heavily injured at the time, if Yemo really cured her, it couldn't be explained with simply some capabilities. She knew that she had an aunt who practiced the ancient martial arts. However, she had never seen her since. From what her mother had said, it was very hard for her aunt to come out. Ancient martial arts were something very mysterious. Many people hadn't even heard of it. Was Yemo also a cultivator of ancient martial arts? But even if he did, he shouldn't be able to treat such serious wounds. Chapter 98 Last News. Chapter 98 Last News. Ning Qingxue nodded. "Sometimes ideas just pop out, just like how I came to Flowing Snake this time. I know it is dangerous here, but I always fantasize that I can meet Yemo and won't be in any trouble. If it had been before, I definitely wouldn't have done such a thing, but now, I can't help myself. I don't know if I miss him, I can't articulate that feeling." Hearing Ning Qingxue's word, Qi Wanqing asked more curiously. "Qingxue, didn't you fake the marriage with Brother Yi? You only wanted Brother Yi to block, and then divorce?" From Qi Wanqing's perspective, it was already very strange for Ning Qingxue to come look for Yemo and Flowing Snake, but now, she wanted to go to the desert. Did she not use Brother Yi as a shield? From the looks of it, why does she seem to have fallen in love with Brother Yi? Ning Qingxue shook her head bitterly, remaining silent for a while before saying, "I don't know why, it's just a feeling. Now I thought I could hear about him from other people, but if there is no longer information about him, perhaps I will never see him again in this big world. I thought Flowing Snake was the last place I could find information about him, but I didn't think I could learn from you that he could have gone to the desert. If I just really lose my lead on him like this, I will regret many years later." Then Ning Qingxue hesitated for a moment before continuing. "You don't understand me. If it were a few months ago, I would definitely not come to a place like Flowing Snake, much less the desert. Sometimes, you wouldn't even notice yourself changing. When you understand, you will discover that some people you are fated to not forget. Indeed, I used him as a shield before, but when I understood who he he had already left without leaving me any opportunity to apologize. Sorry, Wan Qing, the reason I said those words to you was because he must treat you differently. Otherwise, he wouldn't tell you about the fake marriage. Sometimes I really admire you, he would definitely not talk to me about this, yet he had told you. Wan Qing looked at Ning Qingshua's expression and suddenly felt sympathy for her. She should be like herself, but a bit different. When Ning Qingxue had discovered Brother Ye's excellence, Brother Yi had already left her. Meanwhile, she was different, she had discovered his excellence when she was in contact with him. From his tone last time, he didn't seem to have the intentions of marrying her. No intentions of marrying Qingxue? Wan Qing blushed and thought of herself, but she immediately shook her head. She had the same intentions as Ning Qingxue. If she didn't come to find Yemo, he would never go look for her. So this meant that Yemo had the same attitude toward her that he had with Ning Qingxue. They weren't in his heart. Does he have someone he loves? Wan Qing suddenly wanted to see what sort of person Yemo was in love with. Even excellent girls such as her and Ning Qingxue weren't in his eyes, so what sort of person would he like? Wan Qing suddenly stopped herself from thinking and raised her head to look at Ning Qingxue. Qingxue, it's too dangerous for you to go to the desert alone. And Taklamakan is the sea of death, it is countless times more dangerous than Flowing Snake. Perhaps in Flowing Snake you could still meet Fan Nan, but in the Taklamakan, other than sandstorm, you get the scorching sun, it's pretty much certain death there. Ning Qingxue shook her head. I know how dangerous it is, but did you know that not long ago I was someone who was mortally wounded? I've already experienced death once. I just want to ask him if I am really that bad and if it is so hard to just see me once. If he wants me to stop bothering him again, I will leave immediately. He gave me my life, it's nothing if I give it back. Ning Qingshue's tone seemed to get melancholic, and she couldn't continue talking anymore. Wan Qing looked at Ning Qingxue with sympathy and sighed before saying, Qingxue, are you being reckless for Brother Yi? He won't be able to see it. Why would Brother Yi want your life? My life was also saved by him, am I going to give it back? And perhaps it's not that he doesn't want to see you, but that he really is busy. Maybe he doesn't even know that you want to see him. However, Ning Qingxue didn't talk, she was determined. Reckless or not, she couldn't calm down unless she could see Yemo once. Moreover, she felt that she was right, perhaps this was the last news of Yemo, and may never get to see him again if she missed this time. Even if it meant waiting on the rim of the desert, she would still wait. Seeing that Ning Qingxue didn't talk, Wan Qing knew that Ning Qingxue was really determined to do so. She suddenly thought about Ning Qingshue's words. This was perhaps the last news of Yemo. If he left the desert, then who would know where he would go next? The world was so big, who could find him? Thinking about this, Wan Qing suddenly said, Qingxue, how about I'll come with you? I have more experience in the desert, and I've stayed in the military for a few years. You're also going to the desert? When Ning Qingxue heard that Wan Qing came looking for Yemo, she understood that Wan Qing must have felt something for Yemo, but she didn't expect her to also want to go into the desert. Wan Qing nodded her head firmly and said, But before we go, we need to go to Luotsang first. I have a company there. We need to prepare. Going to the desert isn't like going to other places, we need to carry all the tools and medications with us. Fan Nan watched as the two girls left before feeling relieved. It made his heart quiver that these two girls came to Flowing Snake. If something had happened. But although they had left, the things weren't done yet. Because Fan Nan offended Shu Wei, he had to give Amphibious Gang an explanation, otherwise he wouldn't be able to stay here anymore. Fan Nan knew exactly how powerful the Amphibious Gang was. Amphibious Gang was under Nanqing. A real estate business 10 years ago near High Point didn't take them seriously, and in the end, Nanqing didn't even accept their apology and compensation. They were annihilated by them in one night. Every gang at the border knew about this, so for the people from the Amphibious Gang, the gang leaders at the border usually had a good attitude towards them. Now that Fan Nan offended Shu Wei, although he was just a messenger for them, he was still someone of the Amphibious Gang. If they reproach him for it, he must be prepared to pay the price. And if they didn't accept his compensation, he still needed to prepare himself for war. However, Fan Nian knew that for something as small as this, the amphibious gang would be fine with accepting compensation. At most, it would make his heart ache a little. They shouldn't try to annihilate him. The things he had now were given by Yemo. If it hadn't been for Yemo, there was no way he would be able to take back Flowing Snake from the Philippines and Vietnam gang. Plus, he was very respectful toward Yemo and felt that he wasn't an ordinary person. So he didn't regret that he had offended Shi Wei for these two girls. Compared to Fan Nan's trouble and the two girls' search, Yemo's clinic had received quite the notoriety, at least within the nearby region. The second day he saved Zhangxin, the child's parents came to Yemo's clinic to thank him. They also took out $10,000 as gratitude. Yemo didn't take the money. Instead, he actually gave $30,000 to the children's parents. The reason was simple: he wanted this family to help him get all the relevant documents. The child's dad was called Zhang Pa. He worked at the taxation office at Luotsang and was a native, so it should be easy for him to do such things. As Yemo felt like he shouldn't show his face if he could, he had let Yu Era follow Zhang Pa to make the certificates and clinic registration. Many things could be sorted with money. As for whether Yu Era really had the skills or not, no one cared. With the fervent help of the couple, Yemo's clinic had a great reputation despite being open for only 10 days or so. This was all due to their promotional ability. This clinic was called Huichun Clinic after all the documents were made. Yemo pretty much didn't manage anything and just sat in the yard preparing the soil so he could plant the silver heart grass. He left the clinic entirely in the hand of Yu Era. Luckily, Yu Era had experience in medicine, and with Yemo's frequent tutelage, the small diseases that the patients had were cured easily. Yemo gave $20,000 of the remaining 40 to Yu Era for him to buy some herbs and kept the last 20 to prepare the tools needed for the desert. The small clinic didn't even earn money, but Yemo didn't care. His purpose was to grow the silver heart grass. Everything else didn't have priority. If he could earn money, that would be good, but if he couldn't, it didn't matter. The herbs Yu Era bought were cooked into soup or pills by Yemo and put into jars, and then told Era their functions. About medical skills, Yemo never kept anything to himself, so if there was anything he could teach, he would teach it to Era. He even taught him a set of fist technique and breathing technique. Although Yu Era was quite innocent, he was very smart and learned it quickly. Chapter 99, Luo Susu. Chapter 99, Luo Susu. Although Yemo had tried to reject the troublesome conditions, their clinic was still gradually rising in fame. Of course, it was due to the propaganda of the surrounding citizens, but it was mainly due to the discovery that many people only needed to come here once and their diseases were cured, which was different than going to the hospital. If you went to the hospital, you might need to go several days in a row. However, the only bad thing about Huichun was that its prices were a bit high. Normally, if a child went to the hospital, it would only be some over-the-counter medicine or needles, and the expenditure was around $100. However, the same disease at Huichun would cost $200. Nevertheless, since it was Chinese medicine, only one take of the medicine was needed, which was different to the 1-week recovery by the hospital. Many people still liked coming to this fast, effective clinic. Another saying was that Chinese medicine was neutral and more pleasant to the body than Western medicine. Originally, their business barely had any profit, sometimes there were even losses. But because of their astounding results, they became very popular. Luckily, not much people lived here, otherwise, the clinic really wouldn't have enough people to treat every patient. Yemo had pretty much planted the silver heart grass and barricaded it as he was prepared to go to the desert. However, he realized that his business was getting better and frowned. Yemo's idea was that it would be fine as long as the business could make some money. It didn't need to be too good. He understood the logic of keeping a low profile. However, Yemo wouldn't take the money and not cure the patients. This wasn't his character. After thinking for a long while, Yemo could only tell Yu Era that the herbs were limited, and he could only see a limited amount of patients each day. The others would have to wait until the next day. However, Yemo hadn't learned about marketing. He didn't know that after he had made this rule, his business grew more popular instead. Yemo didn't have time to stay every day in the clinic and treat patients. Thus, he had no choice but to teach the basic means and recipes of some medicine to Yu Er. At the same time, he hired a girl to help, and only then did he get free time. When Chi Wan Qing and Ning Qingxue came to Luotsang, Yemo hadn't left yet. Sometimes, one looked very hard but didn't even realize that it was just right beside him. Ning Qingxue and Chi Wan Qing spent almost 2 weeks to prepare while Yemo was still cultivating his silver heart grass in the yard. When the two had already left Luotsang and went to the desert, Yemo was still preparing for food and equipment. Although she knew that Chi Wan Qing hadn't contacted her own family for a long time due to the incident with the marriage, Chi Wan Qing's cousin could no longer remain calm after hearing that they were preparing to explore the desert. In the military, they had connections and people would look after each other, but the desert was merciless, and Chi Wan Qing was going to the Taklamakan. It was dubbed the Sea of Death, and its ethnic name meant place where one could go in, but not go out. So Chi Wan Qing's cousin started to wonder if the two girls were crazy, and why they would go to the Taklamakan for an adventure. So as soon as Chi Wan Qing left with Ning Qingxue, she called Chi Wan Qing's mother, Tang Qianping. You state. Ning Qingxue's mother was talking to a girl in her 20s. What was intriguing was that the girl had a face cover and wore a pale yellow dress. However, her dress wasn't the same style as the modern-day style of young people. It seemed like a dress of an old era. This girl had long, black hair that was casually held up by a water blue clip, and a few loose strands of hair beside her ears gave her an out-of-the-world sense. Su, this time, Qingxue was mortally wounded, and we had thought that she would die, but we didn't expect that she would suddenly be cured in a single night. Otherwise, I wouldn't have called you out. I know how hard it is for you to come out even once, Sai. Lan Yu regretted calling this woman out now because she knew it was hard for her to leave, so she couldn't bother her with trivial things. This time, her daughter was heavily wounded, and thus, Lan Yu thought about it before calling her out. However, she hadn't expected her daughter to be suddenly cured. She really would have had nothing to do if she still looked for trouble with the Song family when her daughter was perfectly fine. It doesn't matter, Sister Yu. If it hadn't been for you before, I wouldn't even be here anymore. Although I went to the hidden doors, I still remember Sister Yu's goodwill, so I would be able to come out a few more times for you, much less this once. Besides, something happened to Qingxue, so it is my duty to come and help her. As for that Song family, I will go have a look. The girl who had a face mask on had the voice of a charming bird, yet sounded spiritual. Just when Lan Yu wanted to stop Luo Susu from going to the Song family, Li Mumei suddenly ran in and said, Auntie Yu, Qingxue went to the Taklamakan desert. When I called her, she had already arrived. I tried to convince her, but she said that she knew what she was doing and then actually shut her phone. Lan Yu suddenly stood up and spoke coarsely. What? You said that Qingxue went to the Taklamakan desert? What is she doing there? She said that she was going on an adventure with her friend. When I asked who she was going with, she only said that it was another girl. 2 girls going to the Taklamakan, this. Even Li Mumei didn't know what to say about Ning Qingxue. Taklamakan, many people have been lost there. Qingxue, this child, why can't she let me worry less? She was very good when she was in Beijing, but why did she change so much ever since coming to Ninghai? Sigh. Lan Yu suddenly sunk back into her seat, speechless. Hearing Lan Yu's words, Li Mumei deeply felt the same. The original Qingxue not only had her own opinion but would never be impulsive for something. In the company, she organized everything, and she would cooperate very closely. But ever since she married Yemo, she changed too much, and now, even Mumei could no longer understand Ning Qingxue and didn't dare to guess what Ning Qingxue was thinking in her heart. Now, she was really naive sometimes. This was greatly discordant with the original Ning Qingxue. Who would block a stick with their own body for a small blade of grass? Previously, she wouldn't have believed that Ning Qingxue would live alone at a far-off house by herself, or go to the desert no matter what. Had she fallen in love? They all say girls who were in love became foolish. The things they do are incomprehensible. However, Li Mumei didn't believe that Ning Qingxue would fall in love with someone either. Li Mumei still didn't know that Ning Qingxue went to Flowing Snake. If she did, she would have perhaps gone mad. Sister Yu, don't worry, I'll bring her back from there. Luo Susu suddenly stood up, speaking in a very soft tone. How can that work, Susu? Taklamakan is the sea of death. You can't go. It doesn't matter how strong you are, the dangers of nature aren't something a person could defend against. I'll tell her dad and get professionals to bring her out. Lan Yu immediately rejected Luo Susu's proposal. Don't worry, Sister Yu, trust me, I can find her and bring her back. I'm going there. Luo Susu's tone was full of confidence. Just when Lan Yu wanted to respond, Luo Susu was already gone. Lan Yu looked at Luo Susu's back and eventually didn't say anything. She knew Susu. She would rarely talk, but when she did, she would do it. And you, is she Aunt Susu? Li Mumei had always heard about this aunt but had never seen her before. Lan Yu nodded. Luo Susu was a little girl that she had picked from the side of the road when she had just married and had gone to the temple to pray. Furthermore, because Lan Yu wasn't pregnant at the time, she had raised Luo Susu like her own sister. However, when she was just 5 years old, a friend of her father-in-law saw her and said that she had the root of wisdom and could enter the hidden doors. Then, they took Luo Susu away. Luo Susu didn't like to talk much since she was young and grew to be extraordinarily pretty. Although Lan Yu didn't want her to go there, her father-in-law said the opportunity was extremely rare. Besides, Qingxue was already 2 at the time, so she listened to the words of her father-in-law. Unfortunately, not long after Luo Susu was gone, her father-in-law had died, and they'd been disconnected from her since. It wasn't until 12 years later that she came back and told Lan Yu the way to contact her, and if they ever had any troubles, they could go to her. Weirdly enough, the last time, she was wearing a mask too. Lan Yu also asked if Luo Susu could visit often, but she said that it wasn't easy. Although it was just one simple sentence, Lan Yu knew that it would be hard, so unless they had to, she wouldn't prefer to ask Luo Susu for help. This time, it was because of Ning Qingxue that she thought about finding Luo Susu. It was customary for the boys to take the father's surname, and the girl to take the mother's surname, so she gave Luo Susu her mother's surname, Luo. Luo Susu had a thick white scarf around her neck showing only 2 eyes. People almost couldn't see her covered face, but her unique dress and astounding posture still attracted a lot of attention. There wasn't a direct plane to the Taklamakan desert, so Luo Susu took the plane to Wulamuki and then changed there. At the airport of Korliai, not long after getting off, Ning Qingxue and Qi Wanqing were stopped. Ning Qingxue subconsciously took a few steps back. The experience at Flowing Snake gave her a deep impression. Dad! Qi Wanqing looked at the man who stopped her and called out. She hadn't seen her father for a few years, and this sudden meeting took her by surprise. Qi Yujun, who was planning to be furious, suddenly had his anger dissipate when he was called Dad. His serious face also relaxed and looked at the daughter he hadn't seen for 3 years. Wanqing, come home with Dad. Chapter 100 stopped. Chapter 100 stopped. Yemo had prepared everything and gave the task of caring for the silver heart grass to Yu Eru. He was prepared to go to the Taklamakan desert. If he were successful this time and found large amounts of purple heart vine, then he would be able to reach the 3rd stage of qi gathering, and as soon as he did, he would find Qian Long too. Forcing him to hide to survive, Qian Long too had been marked by Yemo. He was a cultivator. If he could let it go, he wouldn't be Yemo. It was because of this that he desperately wanted to go to the desert and find the purple heart vine. Just when Yemo was about to leave, Lu Xiaozhen rushed in, her face full of worry. Lu Xiaozhen was the new nurse Yemo recruited. She had graduated from a nursing school and often liked to play with Yu Era, calling him brother under the same master. What? Yemo looked at the anxious Lu Xiaojun and asked. Just then, brother, you took in a patient but just diagnosed through feeling pulse and gave him a small cup of heart-appeasing serum. Then, that man fell unconscious and started frothing. Lu Xiaojun said in one breath and was still puffing for breath. However, the worry on her face didn't lessen because if a small clinic caused the death of a patient, it would be different to a big hospital. The big hospital could deny, but the small clinic had to be fully responsible. Yemo put down the bag he had packed and hurried over to the clinic. He had already told Yu Era not to take the troublesome patients. If they couldn't cure it, it would affect their reputation, but if they did manage to heal it, it would attract too much attention and wouldn't be good for Yemo either. The clinic had opened for more than 20 days, and this was the first time this situation had arisen. Before arriving, Yemo had already scanned with his spirit sense since the clinic was just in front of where Yemo lived. When he came to the clinic, he saw Yu Era sweating, trying to save the man on the bed and was obviously very worried. On the bed laid a man in his 40s, who still had froth coming out of his mouth, but his eyes were closed. Obviously, his condition wasn't light and should be out cold. Beside the man stood a teenage girl who looked like a high school student, and another woman accompanied by a young man. Other than these three, 2 other people in the clinic seemed to be patients here, while 3 people were enjoying the show at the door. Eru, come down first. Yemo, with only one glance, knew that Yu Era's method would not be able to save and wake up the man. Master, you're here! Hearing Yemo's voice, he had finally calmed down. In his eyes, his master was capable of everything. Yemo had already seen that the man being unconscious had nothing to do with the heart-appeasing serum. It was due to other reasons. So Yemo didn't go there to treat him, he wanted to see first what the families would say. If they tried to blame it on him, then he wouldn't be nice anymore. Seeing Yemo look over, the middle-aged woman rubbed her eyes and said, Doctor, my husband has always had this disease, so I don't blame you. I just heard that many people say that you could cure some incurable diseases, so I came to try my luck. However, I didn't expect my husband to have an outbreak again. Sorry, I'll call the ambulance right away. Yemo sighed. This woman had a good character and didn't try to blame him like some other people would, which gave Yemo a good impression of her. Her husband fainted in this clinic, and yet she was still the one to apologize to the doctor there. Yemo remembered when he was in Ninghai, he had read in the newspaper that an old lady fell down, and someone tried to help her up, but she actually blamed that person for knocking her over and even wanted him to pay her compensation. Compared to that, this woman's character was infinitely better, and Yemo decided to save her husband just because of the woman's character. Thinking about this, Yemo waved his hand and smiled. Don't call them. It's useless to go to the hospital unless you want them to do an open brain surgery on your husband. However, that would still be detrimental. Coincidentally, I have a way to cure this disease, so I'll look at it for him now. Ah. This woman was shocked on the scene upon hearing that Yemo could cure her husband. Although her husband's disease wasn't incurable, it was very hard to cure. This was the conclusion they drew from seeing so many doctors. They came to this clinic because they had heard that as long as they took you in, you would be treated. Originally, they came to try their luck and of course, Yu Era rejected to do any treatment. However, he was too kind-hearted. Seeing that this man was in pain, he gave him to drink a cup of heart-appeasing serum, but he didn't expect a problem to arise out of that. Yu Era wanted to help this man, so Lu Xiaojun hurried to get Yemo. Although this woman knew her husband's problem, she hadn't called an ambulance because she had thought that Yu Era would be able to save him. However, she hadn't expected Yu Era to be unable to save her husband, even when his master came out. Thus, she decided to call the ambulance. Nevertheless, she would have never expected this younger-looking man to say that he could cure her husband and was immediately stunned. By the time she had reacted, Yemo was already saving her husband. Yemo knew this man's disease with a scan of his spirit sense. His disease should be called a hereditary hemorrhagic telangiectasia. 1, which was a small pink-red spot in the blood vessels of his brain. Even open-head surgery wouldn't be able to fully remove it, and might instead cause more severe consequences. Thus, Guillermo said that hospitals currently wouldn't be able to treat such disease. However, this disease only tortured people. They would feel headaches all seasons of the year, and the more time passed, the higher frequency it had. Although this disease wouldn't cause people to die immediately, it would be very hard to live over 50 years. An illness that was hard to treat for a hospital was very easy for Guillermo. He only needed to pass his spirit chi into the brain through the needle and remove the red dots. This was even easier than curing the purple coral poison of that old man. After all, he was currently in the late phase of the second stage of chi gathering already. It had only been half an hour, but Guillermo was already done. When he was finishing up, the man actually sat up. Everyone was stunned as they looked at Guillermo, and wondered how there could be such magical doctor. He had only needed half an hour to make a person who looked like he was about to die, lively again. The man sat up and was in shock, but soon, he reacted and touched his pain-free head with joy. That joy was so intense that he was ready to call Guillermo Dad. A few decades of headaches suddenly disappeared. Anyone would be delighted. "Miracle doctor!" this man said, and was about to kneel down and bow his head. However, Guillermo stopped him. "I just happen to know how to cure this disease. If it had been some other illness, I wouldn't have a way." He showed too much of himself healing this man, so he quickly found an excuse. At this moment, both the wife and the two children understood that Guillermo had really cured the man. The woman was so happy that she was going to kneel down with her husband. Nobody knew how much trouble this pain had brought upon their family. Guillermo looked at this family full of gratitude and felt emotional. He thought that the sooner he killed Qianlong Tu, the sooner he would be able to help people by curing some hard diseases. His simple actions could make a family happy for life. The reason that Guillermo would be able to stand out in the open after finishing Qianlong Tu was because if he could do so, the Song family wouldn't dare to do anything to him. He had already heard from Wu Xueming that Qianlong Tu definitely had more power than the Song family. They were incomparable, and he believed Wu Xueming's words. If he had the power to kill Qianlong Tu, the Song family would be wise if they didn't look for trouble. However, Guillermo thought that if he could live without hiding, he wouldn't have the time to practice medicine either, so it seemed that he should teach his skills to Yu Eru. When Yu Eru learned everything, he would be able to cure people instead of him. Although Guillermo didn't want to take too much money, the family still handed over $20,000. Guillermo wasn't short on money now, and the clinic was going well, so he insisted on only taking $5,000. However, no matter how Guillermo tried to explain that he just knew how to cure this disease, the clinic was still rising in fame and popularity. Nevertheless, Guillermo didn't care about this. After briefing Yu Eru, he left for the desert. After getting off the plane, he found a distant place and recovered his usual appearance. He was about to go into the desert and didn't want to go in as Moe, so he switched back to Guillermo. After all, if he was suspected of anything there, then he could use the identity of Moe to cover up. Guillermo wasn't planning on taking the bus into the desert as he didn't want anyone to know what he was doing. Besides, his cloud shadow step was not slower than cars, and actually, it was much faster than cars in the desert. As soon as he had left Corlei, Guillermo felt that he was being watched. He realized that it was 3 people and, although Guillermo didn't know why they were monitoring him, this was at the border of the desert, so he wasn't worried at all. If he went into the desert, it would be very hard for them to find his track. "You wait!" One of the men rode on a motorbike and stopped Guillermo. Seeing that Guillermo had stopped, he asked, "There's a car, why don't you take it? Why are you running?" Then, he waved towards the 2 men behind him. One of them took out 2 photos and, as he looked at Guillermo, he frowned. Seeing this, Guillermo immediately knew he was suspected. He just didn't know what picture they were looking at. "So what if I run?" "Move aside." Guillermo estimated that things would get dirty today. "I can't tell about the face, but the figure looks really similar to Shering, and that man is called Guillermo," the person looking at the photo said. "Take him away first," the man riding the motorbike said. At the same time, he took out a big knife from his bag. Notes 1. If anyone is interested, it is not only in the brain. https://en. Wikipedia. org/wiki/hereditary_hemorrhagic_telangiectasia. Chapter 101 The Battle in the Desert. Chapter 101 The Battle in the Desert. In the east part of Africa near the Somalia, there was an island called Nabin where Qian Longto's army was set. This place was close to the Arabian Sea, so they could enter the sea at any time, which was good to store an army. The place that Qian Longtu chose to reside in was not only good-looking but had a surrounding mountain that shielded it from anyone's view. In any case, even if it weren't shielded, no one would be stupid enough to spy on Qian Longto's army. At this moment, Qian Longtu, who was at an extremely grandiose mansion, was roaring. His only son was killed inland, and now there was still no news of the killer. He had already ordered that if nobody could find the killer's whereabouts, then they should bring him the head of the government authority responsible for that area. However, just when Qian Longtu was getting more and more impatient, a soldier in charge of the communications suddenly ran in and reported, "Godfather, we have news of the killer!" Qian Longtu liked people to call him Godfather, because he had loved the American movie, The Godfather. He often said that he would be better than him. Who? Right now, Qian Longto's greatest worry was that his son's killer wouldn't be found, and now that he heard the killer had been found, no matter how calm he was, he couldn't help but to ask immediately. If it had been anything else, he would sit without moving and wait until the soldier had finished his report, but since it involved his son's killer, he couldn't keep his calm anymore. "We don't know the name of the killer right now, but his figure seems very close to Serene. We have already 3 brothers that have been killed by this man, and the way he kills is exactly the same, shooting metal nails into the forehead. It can be seen that this man is the same person as the killer at Ninghai. Our men must have found something special and went to ask but were killed." The soldier reported everything he knew. Qian Longto's face kept changing but didn't say a word. He knew that the soldier should still have something else to report. As expected, the soldier breathed and continued. After he had killed them and was prepared to destroy the evidence, the local police came. However, this person didn't seem to want to act against them, so he stole the motorbike and drove into the Taklamakan desert. "Our men have already followed him in. Immediately assemble every member of Nanqing. Capture him at all costs, even if it means flipping the desert. Or just kill him and bring his head back as a sacrifice for Shiping." Qian Longtu interrupted the soldier's words and said immediately, "Yemo saw that these 3 people were identifying him through the photo and knew that if he were to let them go, his identity would be exposed. Since they still need to use the pictures, it meant that they weren't 100% sure that Yemo was Serene. It didn't matter if his identity was exposed, but it couldn't be exposed now. Now, he was still in the second stage of Qi gathering, so it was not good for him if his identity was exposed. Once he reached the 3rd stage, he would be able to use many of the magical arts, then it wouldn't matter. Since he knew that these 3 came to investigate him, and were suspecting him, he immediately killed them without mercy. Although he knew they were either from the Song family or Nanqing, Yemo wasn't sure which. However, at the pace the Song family should be investigating him, it shouldn't be them since they wouldn't have such influence, so these people were probably Nanqing's men. Thinking about Nanqing, Yemo was also surprised. As soon as he showed his face, these people came charging over. Luckily he stayed at home and rarely showed his face in Luotsang, otherwise he would probably have been discovered there. Yemo didn't have the slightest remorse in killing these 3, those who wanted his life needed to pay with their own. However, killing people in broad daylight required cleaning up. This wasn't Luoyu continent where no one cared if you killed someone. Just when Yemo was prepared to burn the 3 people, a police vehicle suddenly came over. He deduced that there was a 4th person who had run away and called the police, so now that he had been exposed, Yemo could no longer be bothered with destroying evidence. He rode on the motorbike and escaped into the desert. Although Yemo killed men from Nanqing, he didn't feel the slightest pressure at all. However, he still didn't want to attack the police, and without life-threatening situation, it was too significant to kill them. Emo still wanted to stay here and didn't want to do such thing unless his life was in danger. Even if he had killed the police and removed the evidence there, he wouldn't have been able to seal the information shut since there was still a fourth person somewhere. Before Emo came, he went through large amounts of information regarding the desert. He didn't plan to enter at this point, but he had no other choice. He knew that the most dangerous place was the cool lake near the outskirts, and many explorers had died here. The difference in temperature between day and night was tremendous, and usually explorers would never come here alone. When they did, it was with a big team. Emo also found the names in Coral, Luobu, Holy Door, but he wasn't sure if Luobu was the Luobu Lake. The map didn't point to the direction of Luobu Lake either. However, according to the data he had gathered, Taklamakan once buried large amounts of ancient cities, one of which was the famous Lulan city who had also disappeared here. Many cities along the Silk Road have been buried by the desert in history. Emo didn't know if the Holy Door he had to find was one of the ancient cities here. Emo didn't rush into the desert. Although he was a cultivator, his state was very low, and now, not only he didn't have storage equipment, but he had strayed from the original route, so, after he had gone in the desert, he stopped moving forward. Instead, he took out the map and wanted to carefully determine his following route. Many people who came with many vehicles were eventually buried either in Luobu Lake or someplace else in the Taklamakan Desert. Emo was only by himself now. All the water he had was carried in his bag. He was a far cry from those who had cars filled with water. Emo originally thought that he had gone deep into the desert now and was very far from the nearest road, so those from Nanqing shouldn't be able to chase him here. However, Emo once again underestimated the people from Nanqing. He quickly realized that he had been surrounded after only an hour or two since he had set up the tent. These people were really fast and actually chased into the desert. Emo didn't have time to pack up his tent, and just put his bag on and got ready to run. In the desert, there was no place to hide, and these 20 or so people had at least 10 guns. Although they didn't have any strong guns, and most of them were the same model, it was still enough to threaten Emo. As though knowing Emo's power, those people didn't hesitate to open fire as soon as Emo came out. One person even threw a grenade. Obviously, these people's orders were to bring him back dead or alive. In the desert, Emo didn't have another choice except to kill them all. At the same time he dodged the bullet, the metal nails flew out like flower petals. This wasn't the stone room in Flowing Snake. In this boundless desert, there were almost bullets flying from all directions. Emo was sure that these people weren't from the Song family. They wouldn't be able to get this firepower. They were definitely from Nanqing. Qianlong too managed to get more than 20 people in such a short time and more than 10 guns. It could be seen how powerful Nanqing was. If he had been at their base, then what would the scene be like? Emo was starting to reconsider if he had the power to face Nanqing at their headquarters even after he had reached the third stage. However, he didn't have time to think because another 2 Range Rovers were heading their way. The car's engine could be heard during the battle, and Emo knew that if he didn't finish this quickly, there would be more and more people. He felt some pain on his lower waist, and Emo knew he had been shot. After all, his spirit sense range was still too small, he couldn't dodge the hidden shots. However, the person who shot him was killed by his nail at the next moment. When the Range Rovers were getting closer and closer, Emo had killed everyone who surrounded him before. However, he had also received a gunshot wound, and his tent was full of holes which scared him a little. He didn't want another accident like this to happen. He had used a lot of chi in this battle. After all, he had to dodge bullets. He didn't think a long time before simply leaving his tent behind and quickly dashed into the depth of the desert. While running in the desert, Emo realized he had been a bit careless. He hadn't expected Nanqing to be this crazy, sending people into the desert to obstruct him. He couldn't even act according to his plan before taking a bullet. After 2 hours, Emo was completely lost. Although he knew it was very dangerous to be lost in the desert, this was still much better than tens of people with guns surrounding him. Yemo stopped and treated his wound before realizing that at least 6 of the 20 bottles of spring water he had were pierced by bullets. The direction of the bullet was very weird, it shot through 6 bottles at once. Yemo looked around. It was a boundless desert everywhere, and a few occasionally dead tree. He cursed. Now, he didn't even have a tent. If only he had a GPS. However, Yemo didn't have the money to buy such a thing at all. Seeing that the sky was getting dark, Yemo looked around, took out a sleeping bag from his bag and barely hung it on the big tree. He needed to rest for the night. He just received a gunshot wound and hadn't completely healed yet. Now, there wasn't much water remaining, so he needed to conserve stamina and heal up. Chapter 102, Tear like Milan, White Hair like Silver Sand. Chapter 102, Tear like Milan, White Hair like Silver Sand. The night in the desert was relatively cool, and the calm breath almost made Yemo forget that he was still in the desert. However, due to the disturbances of unknown bugs, Yemo didn't get a very restful sleep. Despite this, Yemo still felt pretty energetic when he woke up the next day. However, during the day, the searing heat of the sun made Yemo feeling like he was in an oven, making him almost doubt if it was the same place from the previous night. The rolling heat wave attacked Yemo, and this wasn't even in June. The weather was slightly cool, but the desert was so hot. It seemed that the temperature here was almost 45 degrees Celsius. If this was in June, would the temperature reach 100 degrees Celsius? Yemo didn't dare to stay too long, although his wound was pretty much fine. The more he stayed in the desert, the more danger there was. Since he came, he needed to hurry up and go about his business. Although Yemo found the words Luobu on the map, he didn't plan to go there immediately because the road he got on the map didn't point to that place, and instead pointed somewhere else. However, after Yemo had run for a day, he saw a vast empty place, surrounded by dunes. The sand rolled everywhere. Yemo had done some research about the Taklamakan Desert, and immediately knew this was the Luobu Lake. The temperature at day was near 50 degrees, but Yemo could endure without it affecting him much. After all, he was a cultivator and was more resistant than ordinary people. However, he only had 9 bottles of water left, and he needed to find a water source fast. Otherwise, he would become dehydrated. Yemo didn't plan to come to Luobu Lake first, but since he was already there, he didn't mind looking at it. After all, there were the words Luobu on the goatskin map. Although it was his first time coming here, Yemo knew this was perhaps the most mysterious place in the desert, and many unexplainable events had happened here. Yemo had made some research and discovered that countless people had been lost here. However, there was also a legend that everyone knew. Before Luobu Lake disappeared, it was called Immortal Lake. It was said that the wind god, in order to prevent his daughter Milan from being together with the mortal Luobu, gouged his eyes and broke Milan's legs before scattering them to the east and west side of the desert, making them forever apart. The two weren't able to see each other anymore, and the longingness for each other was like a sword which fastened their aging. In one night, the beautiful young girl Milan's hair turned white, and her rolling tears gathered and formed a river which converged to form a sparkling lake. This formed the fable of the Luobu Lake. Later on, it was said that Milan's yearning became a fatal sickness, and the night that she had died, the heavens changed, and the river went dry. The beautiful Luobu Lake had since disappeared, leaving behind this place full of silver sand which was said to be made from the young girl's white hair. This was the tearful story of Milan, her white hair, and the silver sand. Yemo suddenly thought of this story when he was standing at the Luobu Lake. When he read the story before, he didn't have much reaction to it, but now, standing at the place where the story happened, he realized how melancholic this was. Separated by the heavens, reminiscence like the sword. Was this exactly like him and his master? He didn't know Luo Ying's feelings before, but now he did and finally understood what separated by the heavens, and yearning like the sword felt like. When he was by Luo Ying's side every day, he didn't pay attention to it, but after leaving, he found that he had really lost something. Now that he was reborn on Earth, he realized how low his EQ was before. He couldn't even tell Luo Ying's feelings and could only feel he liked staying with her. However, when the danger came, the first thing Luo Ying thought about was to take him away. But when she activated the teleportation rune, he seemed to have felt a warm sensation brush past his neck. Now that Yemo thought about it, he realized what that warmness was. When Luo Ying activated the rune, she must have been discovered, and someone sneaked attacked her. But in order to take him away, his master blocked this attack with her own body, and that warmness was the blood she had spat out. Yemo suddenly felt he hated himself. He only understood it now, but even then, what if he did? Could he see Luo Ying? If Luo Ying was still where she was before, would she think about him? Just like Milan's Ter story. Yemo sat on a hardened dune and reminisced the bits and pieces of his memory with Luo Ying and felt immersed at the moment. It was unknown how long he was there before Yemo sensed danger. He moved out as quickly as he could, but there was nothing around him. It was as though his feeling before was wrong. Yemo frowned. His spirit sense clearly felt something was going to attack him, but now he scanned the surrounding 10 meters and found nothing. The day was already dark as it was almost 11 p.m. He had already been standing there for a few hours. Yemo decided to rest one night first and try to find a fresh water source nearby. However, due to his feeling before, he was much more alert. During the night, Luobu Lake was dead silent but mysterious, yet, Yemo was a cultivator. He wouldn't feel much even if he slept at a graveyard, much less a desert. However, he had seen a ghost cultivator before, but he didn't believe there was such thing as ghosts on Earth because if you weren't a cultivator, your soul would dissipate once you died. Meanwhile, most ghost cultivators were cultivators who had high power but didn't want to enter samsara after death, so they used special artifacts to forcefully keep their soul in the cultivation world to cultivate. Although ghost cultivators could still become immortals when they reached the highest stage, almost no one could reach this stage. The silence didn't last long before a faint and distant shrieking sounded, but since Yemo knew that there were some animals in the desert, he didn't mind. However, the spirit chi was even more scarce in the desert, so Yemo couldn't cultivate. He could only sit beside a salt pile and rest. As such, he only rested for an hour before that feeling of being ambushed gushed in his heart again. Yemo took out a few metal nails and closely followed the thing that wanted to ambush him. Although he couldn't scan it, he felt it. As though feeling Yemo's vigilance, the thing that wanted to ambush didn't move but just watched Yemo. At this moment, Yemo knew that his senses weren't wrong. He really was being watched by something, and this thing was very patient. However, it was outside the range of his spirit sense, and he could only feel it. However, Yemo wouldn't lose to anyone comparing patience. He often cultivated for more than a year, so a few hours was barely anything. Another hour passed, and the thing that hid in the darkness seemed to feel that it was being too careful. Who could discover it when it hid in the sand? It no longer hid and jumped up and rapidly aimed for Yemo's head. Its speed even reached Mach 1. However, Yemo could even dodge normal bullets, not to mention that he had his attention focused on this thing, so how could he let it attack his head? At that instant, he dodged and shot multiple nails out. A shrieking cry resounded, similar to the shriek of a mouse, but amplified many times. He knew that his nails had hit its target, and at this moment, Yemo punched toward the dark shadow. However, Yemo realized that his killing blow had missed. That dark figure had run away. But how could Yemo let this dark figure escape after grasping its trail? He didn't even think before chasing, yet, after chasing for more than 10 minutes, he still couldn't catch the dark figure. Seeing that this dark figure was faster than him, Yemo threw out 2 fireballs. PSH. The fireballs hit the sand, blasting sand everywhere, but the black figure had disappeared. Yemo just felt his head numb. He didn't believe in ghosts, but this unexplainable thing just happened in front of his eyes. He clearly saw his fireball land on the dark figure and just disappeared. However, he didn't believe that his fireball could turn the dark figure into nothingness. He wasn't that powerful yet. The surrounding was scarily quiet. The thing that screamed disappeared, and everything else was just the same. Yemo calmed down. It was too late. even if he wanted to find something, he had to wait until the next day. When Emo was prepared to come look again the day after, he suddenly realized he had lost his sense of direction. It had only been 10 minutes, but he was completely lost. At this moment, Emo felt the seriousness of the issue. When he chased the dark figure, he didn't think he would be lost at all, so he didn't carry his bag with him. All of his things were in his bag, so if he lost his bag, it would be a failure even if he managed to get out of here because there were some silver heart grass seed and the purple heart vine in there. Not to mention these things, he wouldn't last long in the desert without water, even as a cultivator. He needed to go back immediately and find his bag. However, Emo immediately rejected this idea. If he went back at this time, he could perhaps get farther and farther away, and eventually lose his bag forever. Chapter 103 Yellow-Clothed Woman. Chapter 103 Yellow-Clothed Woman. Emo calmed down his emotions and didn't continue looking for his bag. Instead, he simply sat down where he was. At this moment, he needed to be calm. Any bit of worry might make him take the wrong choice again. Previously, he definitely wouldn't have believed that he would get lost after chasing someone for only 10 minutes. It was said that the Taklamakan Desert was a bewilderment formation. Now it seemed that there really was one. Although he hadn't slept for the night, Emo was still full in spirit. The only thing he thought about in his heart was his bag. As soon as dawn approached the next day, Emo returned to where he had hit the black shadow with a fireball the night before and was amazed to see that the 2 marks he had made with the fireball had disappeared. There were no signs of movement on the sand, but the mark last night just seemed to have been washed by the sand again. Emo didn't want to waste time here. The scorching sun had risen up once again. If he couldn't find his bag quickly, losing things was insignificant, but losing his life wasn't an option. Although he was a cultivator, he was only in the 2nd stage of chi gathering and wasn't sure how long he could stay under this blazing sun. He couldn't do one, or even eat nothing for a week, much less under such harsh conditions. He studied where he was for a long time before calculating a direction according to the sun and darting that way. A little more than 10 minutes later, Emo stopped. His direction was obviously not right. If it were right, he would have found where he had rested the night before at that point. When Emo returned back once again, he made the surprising discovery that the place he came back to didn't seem to be the same as before. However, the sand around him looked the same, and he couldn't really tell at all. Although he wouldn't get worried over this, Emo knew the situation was serious. Before, he didn't have a GPS, but he had a compass and some tools to tell the direction. But now, he didn't have anything at all and was lost. Emo knew that usually, people who came to the desert would have some positioning tool with exact longitude and latitude. However, he didn't. He had originally thought that with his cultivation powers, this shouldn't matter much, but now, he realized how wrong he was. But even if he had bought a cheap GPS, he wouldn't have kept it on him, and would have probably left it in the bag. Now Emo felt like he was stuck in a formation. Emo wasn't completely clueless about formation. He knew some formations, and as long as he had the material, he could set up hundreds of them. However, the place he was lost at didn't seem totally like a formation. Emo sighed as he thought that if only he had a storage equipment, then he wouldn't have to worry about losing his bag at all. Emo didn't run back and fro and, in the end, just chose a direction and left. Since he was already lost, there was no point staying here. The following 2 days, Emo hadn't seen any signs of humans or animals. There were no water sources either. Under such scorching sun in the desert, if a normal person ran around like Emo, no matter how strong he was, he would have been gone already. Even Emo started to feel that he couldn't take it anymore, and if he continued like this, perhaps it would only be a few days before he would be devoured by the desert. Living for 3 days and 4 nights without drinking or eating, Emo felt the chi in his body withered, and yet, he had no way to cultivate here. The 5th day, Emo, who had cracked dry lips, seized any intentions of finding a water source. He was unfamiliar with the desert, he wouldn't know what place should have water. If he didn't meet any people or water, he would be in a dangerous situation. But if he didn't keep searching, he would be baked under the sun and wouldn't last much longer as well. He could only dream to be in the third stage right now. Emo felt helpless, his powers were still too weak. Just as he was thinking, Emo suddenly noticed the sand under his feet seemed to be flowing slowly. However, that speed was very slow, and if Emo didn't have spirit sense, he would definitely be unable to tell. Emo focused again and found that all the sand gradually flowed to a position under his feet. However, there was no sand building up there. What was happening? No buildup of sand. This meant that all the sand had disappeared under the ground. Disappeared under the ground? Emo was startled. Since it disappeared under the ground, it meant that the ground below him should be empty. Thinking about this, he no longer dared to remain here. He had already used as much power as he could, so if there was a sand whirlpool suddenly, he wouldn't have the means to escape. But just as Emo was thinking about this and wanted to leave, the sand under his foot suddenly started to spin. Emo felt it was hollow under his foot, and he was about to sink in. Emo knew clearly that if he was taken away by the sand, he would die with his current state. He didn't want to be taken in by the sand. He stood on the sand and jumped, flying about 5 to 6 meters in the air. But soon, he felt something was wrong. Although he jumped up, the suction under his foot was still there, and he didn't have any landing spot. A few days ago, perhaps he would have been able to dash out of the whirlpool with a burst of power. But now, he could only watch as he slowly went down. Even if he used his chi to the maximum, he could only at most slow down the speed of descent. The chi in his body was no longer enough to support him moving around. Emo sighed. He didn't expect that he would die like this in the desert. At this moment, he thought of many things. Luo Ying's smile and voice circulated around him, and also what Ning Qingxue had said that night. The things I left in the garden are for Emo. He was stunned for the moment. Just when Emo was about to accept the fate of being devoured by the sand, he suddenly felt his waist tighten as a white strand of clothes twisted around his waist. Although he was stunned briefly while being devoured by the sand, he wouldn't let such opportunity pass. He immediately grabbed the strand, and just when he was prepared to pull himself out, he felt his waist tighten, and he was flung up. When he fell on the hard sand ground, the white strand was taken back. Emo was astonished. This person's ability was a level higher than the Huqiu he met last time. Who was this person? Standing 10 meters away from Emo was a woman with a pale yellow dress. She had a cloth covering her face and was staring at Emo right now. Her eyes were clear and vibrant, giving people a sense of serenity. It was actually such a woman, and she still wore a dress in the desert. If Emo weren't a cultivator, he would have thought this woman was a goddess. However, Emo obviously wouldn't believe so. Although he couldn't see her face, the temperament and body of this woman were already indescribable. The faint yellow dress stood under the blazing sun without moving at all, as though she was an eternal goddess. However, the backpack behind her also told people that she wasn't a goddess. She was also someone who came to explore the desert. Her hair was a bit messy, but the few black strands that came out made her feel like a goddess even more. Looking at her, Emo seemed to see his master Luoying, who was just standing in front of him. He couldn't help but call out, "Master!" It was at that instant that he felt he was in love with this woman. This was the first woman that he actually fell in love with other than Luoying. Even for Luoying, he only realized his dependence later on. This woman looked at Yemo's messy look, who didn't have anything with him. Then when she heard Yemo mumbling, "Master," she couldn't help but frown, but that was it. She didn't say anything. Yemo had come to his sense. He already understood that the woman in front of him was no ordinary woman. Otherwise, she wouldn't be coming to the desert dressed like this. He turned around and looked at the whirlpool, but it had already disappeared. He knew this woman had saved his life and also realized his impoliteness, so he quickly saluted with his fists and said, "Thank you, sister, for saving my life." "Sister?" The woman seemed to be stunned at the way Yemo called her. She saw Yemo almost drown in the quicksand and knew his bag was probably devoured by the sand, but she still didn't say anything. She just took out a bag of water and biscuits and threw it to Yemo. Yemo took the things but didn't open the bag to drink first. Instead, he saluted with his fists once again and said, "Thank you for giving me water. If I, Yemo, don't die, I will pay you back." The woman looked at Yemo's actions and didn't say anything. However, she felt weirder. She saw that Yemo's lips were dry, so obviously, he hadn't drunk water for a long time. Normally, someone who hadn't drunk water for a long time in the desert would dash and drink to their heart's content when they saw water. However, this man, although looking a bit shabby, didn't have any worry of being devoured by the sand. He even seemed calm and talked in a very literate way. Yemo saw this woman just look at him but didn't talk. However, he didn't mind. He could tell that this woman didn't live in the city, otherwise she wouldn't be dressed like this. He had already thanked her, so he opened the bag and drank more than 10 mouthfuls. However, he didn't stick his mouth to the bag and poured it down instead. Did he mind her? She hadn't drunk from the bag, but seeing Nemo's way of drinking, she felt more surprised. He was so thirsty, but he only drank a little more than 10 mouthfuls. This person's self-control and heart were really stable. However, what took her even more by surprise was that Yemo passed the water bag back. This woman frowned. Of course, she wouldn't take back something she gave out, especially after Yemo had drunk from it. Although he didn't touch his mouth with it, she still didn't want it back. Suddenly, this woman wondered if this man had planned to give the bag back to her after drinking, which was why he didn't touch it with his mouth. He was in the desert without water, but he still was able to give this bag of water back to her. Notes 1. Pai Gu, the state where the cultivator no longer needs to rely on food for energy. Chapter 104 Kulu. Chapter 104 Kulu. The woman hadn't realized that Yemo had scanned her bag with his spirit sense, but other than a few simple girls' items, there were only a few bags of biscuits, and these 2 bags of water. The other one only had a bit more than a half. Regardless of who this woman was, Yemo felt respect for her for the fact that she could give more than half of her water to a stranger. He was a cultivator, so with these 10 mouthfuls of water, he should be able to find his bag after asking for directions from this woman. He didn't want to endanger that woman's life because of the water, since no matter how strong she could be, she wasn't a cultivator that could use chi to recover. Without water, she may be worse off than him. Seeing that this woman looked at him without speaking, Yemo just felt a little confused and wondered if this woman was mute, which would be too unfortunate. How could such a stunning woman be mute? "I just lost my bag. Can you tell me how to head to the center of Luobu Lake?" Seeing that this woman didn't talk, Yemo could only explain himself. The woman took out a small round disc and looked at it before suddenly pointing a direction. Then, she turned and left. However, she didn't take back the food and water Yemo tried to pass back. From the moment this woman had saved Yemo and gave him directions, she hadn't said one word, so he wasn't sure if she didn't want to talk or couldn't. Seeing the woman disappearing, Yemo felt like he had lost something. He had seen a lot of beautiful women, Ning Qingxue, Qi Wanqing, Su Jingwen, even Yun Bing was very beautiful, but he had never seen someone like this woman who made him lose a part of his soul. Yemo followed the direction she pointed and sprinted over. He didn't expect to find that place in less than half a day. The place that he had looked so hard for a few days was so actually close. Yemo was speechless. However, when Yemo came back to his resting place, he realized that his bag had disappeared. People had come here these few days, and Yemo saw some of their messy footprints, and immediately knew his things were taken. He followed the footprints, and just walked 100 to 200 meters before finding 2 utility cars behind a dune, and 4 Caucasians were sitting under a tree, eating. His bag was tossed aside, and one of them was looking at Yemo's porcelain bottle which contained his pills inside. Yemo walked over and packed his bag, but the model Wendong gave to him was missing. Yemo immediately scanned with his spirit sense, and found it lying inside one of the cars, covered in a box. It seemed these people also knew that it was worth quite a lot. Seeing Yemo pick the bag up, one of the men immediately came and spoke for a long time. Yemo had learned some simple English in Ninghai University so he could understand, but he couldn't be bothered to respond. These people took his things and asked why he was taking it back. Who are you? This bag is ours. Why are you taking it? That man holding the bottle reproached aggressively toward Yemo. He actually spoke fluent Chinese. Yemo immediately grabbed the bottle from his hand and put it back in his bag. He sneered. Yours? I left it 200 meters over there. How is it yours? This foreigner was still going to speak, but the person next to him stopped him and spoke in English. Max, since this bag is his, let him take it. We don't lose anything. Then, he signaled, and this man called Mac immediately stopped. Yemo knew what they were thinking, but why would he let them do as they wish? When Dong gave that model to him, although he didn't have any use for it, he didn't want to leave it to a few bad-looking people. Originally, these few people didn't think Yemo had noticed his model was gone, but they saw Yemo walk straight toward one of the cars and open the case containing the model. He took out the model and the information before dumping it on the ground. How did he know it was in the car? These few foreigners were still thinking when Yemo had already stashed the things inside. The four men reacted and immediately stopped Yemo. Solving things the hard way? Yemo sneered and used a swirling wind kick and sent the foreigners flying out meters away. Then he looked bleakly at them. If you dare to come again, I won't go easy anymore. The four looked at each other and watched as Yemo just walk out of there. They didn't dare to speak anymore. Although Yemo thought it would be best to kill these four, he thought it would be overreacting for killing these people when they just took a bag in the middle of nowhere. However, when Yemo didn't walk far, he suddenly remembered something and walked back once again. What do you want? We already gave it back to you. The man who could speak Chinese asked worriedly. Yemo ignored him and just took a map of the desert from the car. He didn't have one, so with this, he would be able to find a way back even if he ended up being lost again. He looked at the GPS that seemed to be charging in the car. Yemo pulled it off, but it was immediately out of power. He thought and chucked it back. Then he took another foldable backup tent and 10 bottles of water into his bag. Seeing Yemo just take those few men felt relieved. But then, something that made them worry happened again. Yemo actually took some silver pieces in the car. What took Yemo's attention wasn't their worth, but because it had the Tibetan character door. Could the letter before it be holy? Yemo knew these foreigners came to the Taklamakan to make a fortune. They were looking for these artifacts. The relevant departments wouldn't even care if they took it. Yemo couldn't be bothered with these things, but with that character, Yemo immediately took it seriously. Seeing Yemo just take one piece and left the other things untouched, these few foreigners felt relieved once again. The piece didn't worth much. Where did you find this silver piece? Yemo waved it in front of the foreigners and asked. The foreigners looked at each other but didn't talk. Yemo sneered and spoke once again. If you don't want to speak, fine, but I see there are a lot of good things on your car. I don't mind driving your car away. Oh, by the way, I could make a fire with the remaining car. As soon as Yemo spoke, the man who could speak Chinese immediately said, I know. Hearing these words, Yemo threw the map over and said, Show me the location on this map. If there is the slightest difference with mine, I'll make sure you won't leave the desert. It's already marked on the map. The man spoke quickly. Yemo opened the map and indeed saw a place marked with a few English words. Before Yemo asked what it meant, the man explained. We found the silver pieces there because we had found a stone tablet marked with Kulu, so we called that place Kulu. The man didn't seem like he was lying, so Yemo took the map and didn't bother with these few people. He took out his simple map and compared. He made the surprising discovery that this Kulu was the exactly same place marked in his goatskin map. Kulu was probably what he was looking for. Yemo suppressed the joy in his heart, thinking whether this Kulu was the Kulu Lake or not. Yemo needed to get there quickly, and the map he took from the foreigners were much more precise than his map. Everything was marked clearly on the map. Seeing Yemo didn't take their car, they finally felt relieved. China's kung fu was too magical. That man just kicked, and they all flew. Guillermo believed that these guys were preparing to go back. They didn't have much equipment on their car. Since he had a map and simple navigation equipment, he would be much faster than a car in the desert. After all, there were many places a car couldn't go. Although he had a map and the precise location, Guillermo wasn't in a rush. He knew he couldn't be hasty if he wanted to find that place, and he needed to keep his calm. He thought about what happened a few nights before and knew that the black shadow that attacked him was definitely a type of animal in the desert. As for why he would lose his way, he still couldn't understand. But one thing was for sure, he hit his nails. Thinking about the disappearing shadow and fire marks as well as the whirlpool that almost made him lose his life, Guillermo connected these things together. He wondered if the place he had sat before was also gradually falling and that caused the marks to disappear? However, thinking that he was sitting at a place where sand fell down, no matter how strong Guillermo's heart was, cold sweat slowly fell down his spine. He then thought about the goddess-like woman who saved him. Who was she? In order to conserve his stamina, Guillermo didn't run, he chose to walk during the day and rest at night. Ever since he had met the whirlpool that day, Guillermo was very cautious. When he rested, he would make sure he found a good place. On the third night after acquiring the map, Guillermo stopped at a wall that had been ruined by the sand. He was preparing to rest here for the night before continuing. Chapter 105 The Person Trapped in the Desert. Chapter 105 The Person Trapped in the Desert. At this moment, Qi Wanqing and Ningqing Xue had already entered the desert. However, they didn't come by themselves as originally planned. Instead, there was a whole vehicle crew. Although Qi Wanqing didn't want her father intervening, her father didn't bring up about anything in the past this time and allowed her to enter the desert. Thus, she could only retreat a step. Besides, she knew that her father was doing it for her sake. With her compliance, Qi Yujun not only arranged a few cars for Qi Wanqing but also sent people to go with her in the desert. This was using his authority for private matters, but if it hadn't been for his daughter, Qi Yujun would have never done such thing. However, he had no choice. The daughter he hadn't seen for a few years was going to the desert, and no matter how he had tried to persuade her, she wouldn't agree. He didn't want to have a big fight again, so he could only comply and send people to protect her. Guillermo carefully inspected the wall he was sleeping at overnight. Feeling that it was very sturdy, he was assured and opened up the tent. It would be too hot for sleeping bag at night, so he didn't bother pulling that out. At night, Guillermo didn't want to sleep. He was cultivating outside the tent, but by midnight, he felt he was being watched again. This feeling made him very uncomfortable, and he felt more weird. He wasn't the only person to come to the desert, but why did this only happen to him? Guillermo didn't continue waiting this time. He packed his things into the bag and carried his bag. He felt that the thing that was watching him stayed where it was. He wasn't sure if it was the same thing from last night, but since he was being watched, it meant that there was something attracting it from him. As for what it was, he didn't know. Was it still a bear cockroach watching him? Guillermo knew this was impossible because it wouldn't be able to survive in the desert. He came to the desert to find the purple heart vine. Did this thing come because of the purple heart vine in his bag? Because other people didn't have it, only he did. If that was the case, this would mean that the thing was sensitive to the purple heart vine. After Guillermo put on his bag, he wasn't in a rush to attack this thing. Instead, he took out a metal nail and marked it with his spirit sense before suddenly standing up and walking away from the wall. At the same time, he shot the nail towards the black shadow. Chhh, Guillermo knew he hit his target and immediately chased. This time, he had everything with him, so he wasn't afraid of getting lost. With his food and water as well as his powers, he would be able to survive a month or two in the desert without problems. This time, Guillermo didn't lose it. He followed closely behind. Although the shadow was on the border of escaping his spirit sense range, he had marked it with a nail. Guillermo believed that as long as his spirit sense focused the nail, he would be able to catch that shadow. Although Guillermo followed the shadow closely, he felt intrigued about the shadow's stamina. He was sure his nail hit it, but how was it still able to run so fast? The shadow that attacked him a few days ago was like this as well. Just when Yemo was thinking of a way to speed up and catch the shadow, a feeble cough sounded from the distance. The sound was so small that if his hearing wasn't great, he definitely wouldn't be able to hear it. Just phasing for this moment, Yemo lost track of the black shadow. However, Yemo wasn't annoyed. That black shadow must have gone hiding somewhere. The black shadow was shot by the nail. Even if it took the nail out, he worked the nail and would be able to find it with the spirit sense mark. It would be fine at least within a few hours. Now that the thing disappeared, Yemo couldn't be bothered finding it. He just followed where that moan was before. 2 men and a woman leaned weakly against a tattered tent. Yemo's spirit sense scanned them before he even went there. The 3 had messy and dirty hair and looked very shabby. The 2 men actually carried guns with them. Although that woman didn't have a gun, there was ferocity in her expression. Yemo seemed to have seen this ferocity somewhere. Looking at the position they were sitting, it was obvious these 3 weren't in the same group. Although they all looked like they were about to die, the 2 men still stared vigilantly at the woman as if preventing her from playing any tricks. As soon as Yemo arrived, the 3 were immediately frightened. It was in the middle of the night in the desert, and a figure suddenly appeared. No matter how brave they were, they would still be frightened. Although they were shocked, it was obvious they had no strength left to get up. However, one of them pointed a gun at Yemo but didn't fire. Yemo noticed their cracked lips and their sandstorm-tattered clothes. It was obvious they had been in the desert for a while. "Who are you?" A person holding a gun asked nervously at Yemo. "Are you a human or a ghost?" The woman looked very threatening, but how could she not be afraid seeing a person carrying a bag in the middle of the night in the desert? She subconsciously moved toward those 2 men, but perhaps she was out of energy, so she only moved a little bit. "Who I am is not important, but if you continue to point a gun at me, I'll guarantee you won't see tomorrow's sun," Yemo said faintly. He hated people pointing guns at him, and these 3 didn't look like ordinary people. Even when they were fatigued by the desert, he could still feel their ferocity whether it was the woman or the 2 men. To Yemo's surprise, the person suddenly took the gun back and coughed before saying tiringly, "I hate the morning sun right now." Yemo suddenly felt this person was a bit cute and smiled. "You are lost in the desert?" At this moment, the 3 could be sure Yemo wasn't a ghost. He should be someone exploring the desert. The man who packed the gun away also felt relieved. Perhaps they could be saved by this person. At this moment, he didn't ask Yemo for water and said admiringly, "Brother, I really admire you. You can survive in the desert as if you were taking a stroll. Don't tell me you came here on foot." Yemo didn't answer the man's words and looked at the other 2. The man explained, "I'm Li Hu, and this is my partner in crime, Ching Hongjia. We were apprehending a criminal in the desert, but we lost our way. Our car is out of oil, so we dumped it in the desert. We wanted to ask for backup, but our communication and GPS were all useless. Then, we walked some distance trying to find a place with signal, but it was worse. We are still lost, and it has already been many days now." Seeing Yemo didn't talk, Li Hu took out his phone and said, "Originally, I thought we could still call for help even if we were lost, but a few days later, the phone was out of battery. Plus, in order to capture her, we went into the desert in a hurry and basically didn't prepare anything. Although we caught her, but we're trapped in the desert and probably will die in a day or 2. This Li Hu seemed to be free-spirited and didn't take death seriously. Yemo looked at the woman thinking that although she had been tortured by the desert to the point that she couldn't move, her ferocity was still there. Since they were capturing criminals, it meant these 2 were from the police or another department like that. "Shameless, you 2 are the criminals. Is that thing yours? What right do you have to get it from me? Besides, it's not even on me." The woman immediately rebutted, and her tone was rather contemptuous. Yemo couldn't be bothered with these things. He didn't care who was right or wrong. Seeing these 3 unable to sustain much longer, he took out 15 bottles of water and gave 5 to each. Since these 3 weren't from the same group, he would give it to them separately in order to avoid conflict. He didn't give them food since he had seen some food in their bags. Thanks, brother, I don't need this much. 3 are fine, you are still in the desert, keep some for yourself. Li Hu took some water and thanked him immediately. Yemo gave them water because he had found a lot, and another reason was because that yellow-dressed woman was generous when saving him. He felt he was affected too. Of course, Yemo liked Li Hu's personality. This person was optimistic. Now that he told Yemo to keep some, Yemo had a better impression of him. Chen Hongxue took the water and thanked Yemo but didn't say the water was too much. He quickly opened a bottle and drank everything. He looked at the remaining water and didn't continue drinking. He knew he couldn't drink too much now. The woman took the 5 bottles and thanked Yemo excitedly. Thank you, you are a really good person. I'm called Feng Tian, and I only need 3 bottles too. Then she gave 2 bottles back to Yemo. Yemo waved his hand. I still have 10 bottles, you don't need to give it to me, I have enough. However, he felt Feng Tian's temperament didn't match with her name, 1. She looked ferocious, but her name was very docile. Chen Hongxue saw that out of the 3, he was the only one to not say anything and drank first. He felt quite awkward. Li Hu drank half a bottle and felt that he had recovered a lot. Then, he looked at Feng Tian and said, Okay, you say you're not a criminal, but do you dare to say you weren't from Beisha? You dared to say that the explosion in Tandu a few months ago was unrelated to you? Are you still going to say you didn't take that thing? We already said. As long as you give me that, I can even give you payment and won't look for trouble. Besides, do you even need it? Feng Tian opened her mouth but eventually didn't say anything. Note: 1. Tian means sweet. Chapter 106 Chase. Chapter 106 Chase. Yemo suddenly understood. The explosion a few months ago at Tandu was done by Wendong and him. Back then, he had heard Gong Huishan say that Wendong was from Beisha. Although Yemo didn't know what kind of organization it was, now that Li Hu said that Feng Tian used to be in Beisha too, he finally understood why he felt that familiar feeling from her. It was because of Wendong. Yemo looked at Li Hu and suddenly smiled. You actually accused wrongly Feng Tian this time because first, she doesn't have what you're looking for, and second, she hadn't even tried to take it. Yemo didn't tell them about the explosion a few months ago, he only helped Feng Tian because she was indeed innocent and hadn't exposed Wendong. Besides, Li Hu also said that if she had taken it out and gave it back, she wouldn't be held responsible and would even be rewarded. Nonetheless, this thing was kind of useless to Yemo. How do you know? Do you know what we're looking for? Li Hu just recovered some strength after drinking water. He stood up, but his body was still weak. Yemo waved his hand. You don't need to know how I know, but since you mentioned a reward for this thing, we could make a deal. It doesn't matter even if I sell it to you, my friend doesn't need it anyway. Li Hu immediately called out in surprise. Of course we agree, definitely. Name a price, we will definitely accept it. He didn't even say that Yemo couldn't ask for too much. From this, it could be seen how important this thing was to him. Besides, he probably knew that if Yemo could give water to strangers in the desert, he definitely wouldn't be some nasty person. Before Yemo could respond, Feng Tian yelled in surprise. Do you know where Sister Dong went? The hope in her eyes was obvious. This I don't know. Yemo could tell that not only Feng Tian came from the same organization as Wendong, but they seemed to have left it together, and their relationship was quite good. Hearing Yemo's words, Feng Tian's eyes flashed with a sliver of disappointment. Yemo, however, turned around and gave a look of approval to Li Hu, thinking that his name didn't match with his character. 1. Seeing Li Hu looking desperately at him, Yemo smiled. How much can you give? $500,000, Li Hu said. Feng Tian immediately rebutted. This thing could easily sell for a few million on the international market. How can you even say 500,000? Li Hu's eyes flashed with guilt after hearing Feng Tian's words. For him, 500,000 was the highest he could give. After all, his department wasn't the same as those foreign departments. He also understood his price was absurdly low, perhaps not even 10% of its worth. Yemo could tell from his expression that 500,000 was probably the highest price Li Hu could afford. Anyway, he really didn't need it, and it took up a large space in his bag, which annoyed Yemo quite a bit. Since he had a good impression of Li Hu, he wouldn't waste time, that he surely didn't have, haggling on a model that was useless to him. Now, his main purpose wasn't to earn money, but of course, it was always good to have money, and Yemo was very satisfied if he could get $500,000 out of nowhere. In fact, 500,000 is indeed a bit low. How about I give another 200,000? Li Hu said awkwardly. Cheng Hongzhi suddenly interrupted. Li Hu, where are you going to get another 200,000? Are you going to use your own money? Before Li Hu replied, Yemo waved his hand and said, Okay, 500,000 is good, I'll sell it to you. Then, Yemo took out that model and the information and passed it to Li Hu. You're talking about this, right? Li Hu was stunned as he had never expected things to be so successful. Feng Tian, who hadn't expected that it would be on him, was also surprised Li Hu finally understood and took it as if he were dreaming. He flashed it with a torch and said, Yes, it's this, thank you. I really didn't expect to find this in the desert. However, I don't have any money with me. Even Li Hu felt embarrassed himself. Although this was very important to him, it still didn't belong to him. He couldn't just speak empty words. However, Yemo smiled and said, Then you owe me, leave me a number, I'll call you when I get back, and you'll give the money to me then. What? Not only Li Hu was shocked, but even Feng Tian and Cheng Hongzhi were surprised and wondered how someone could have so much trust when doing business. Li Hu really didn't know what to say. He could tell Yemo wasn't an ordinary person, but he didn't expect him to be so trustful. He didn't ask how Yemo got the thing because he didn't want to know the details. Everyone had their own secrets, and since this person trusted him so much, he shouldn't be too curious about it. After thinking about it for a moment, Li Hu saluted. Friend, Li Hu, won't be too polite with you since it doesn't only concern me, but we are definitely friends now. I also want to ask for your name, otherwise, I wouldn't know who to give the money to. I'm Yemo. Yemo didn't hide his name. Wendong already knew it anyway, and the Song family should be aware of his presence here too. Yemo? Li Hu repeated but didn't think about it too much. Then, he said, My number is 13817XXXX Beijing. Suddenly, Li Hu stopped because he realized Yemo had already disappeared. Only a bottle and a compass were left behind. Immediately after, a voice reverberated. There are 3 pills in the bottle, take 1 each, and you will recover soon. Goodbye. Li Hu picked up the bottle and thought for a long while before saying, Brother Yi is really a magical person. Then, he opened the bottle and looked at the 3 black pills. Can this thing even be eaten? Cheng Hongzhi looked at the pills and frowned. As long as Brother Yi gave it, I believe they are edible. Then, Li Hu ate one without hesitation. Feng Tian sneered and also took one from Li Hu's hand. Only Cheng Hongzhi was hesitating as he looked at the remaining pill. Afterward, Feng Tian stood up with a face full of surprise. She whipped her hair and said joyfully, There are actually such magical pills. If you don't want this, give the remaining one to me. Then, she tried to take the remaining pill in Li Hu's hand. Li Hu was also surprised. He thought that this pill was so magical. He only took one, and he immediately felt his fatigued body recovering. Seeing Feng Tian trying to snatch it, of course, he didn't give it to her, and instead threw it to Cheng Hongzhi. Quickly eat it. Recover your strength, and we will leave the desert immediately. Then, he looked at the direction Yemo disappeared before mumbling once again. Brother Yi is really a magical person. He could possibly be from one of the ancient martial arts families. Only they would have such magical pill, and only they would be able to walk in the Taklamakan desert so casually. Yemo didn't have time to talk with them because he had felt that black shadow again. He wanted to know what this thing was and if it was sticking with him for the purple heart vine. Of course, Emo only looked for 10 minutes or so and finally saw another obscure black shadow. Although it was very fast, Emo's wasn't slow either. The black shadow looked like the root of a tree, and Emo even wondered if it had transformed from a tree root. Even though Huyang trees were said to live for millennia, Emo knew his idea was too otherworldly. Emo was so focused on chasing the black shadow in front of him, he didn't even look at the direction or notice his path. However, this time he had his bag with him and didn't need to worry about this. He didn't believe that a desert could devour a cultivator with supplies. So a few hours later, when the sky was getting brighter, Emo could already start to see what was in front of him. That black figure really was a Huyang tree root. The sky was bright, and Emo wouldn't worry about this thing getting away. But now, when this thing was right in front of Emo, it suddenly disappeared again. If it wasn't for the fact that Emo had been prepared and left a spirit sense mark on the nail, he would have lost it again. At this moment, Emo had finally understood. No wonder it kept appearing and disappearing when he chased it the night before. This shadow could travel through the sand, and without the mark, he couldn't keep up with it. And now that Emo understood, he wouldn't let it go. This thing was extremely fast in the sand too, but Emo kept a tight chase. He refused to believe that he couldn't chase up an animal in the desert. This shadow not only had a strong life force but stamina as well. After playing tag with Emo in the desert for the entire day, it finally slowed down. Emo also gasped a breath. He was feeling tired. He took out a bottle and drank it clean. Suddenly, Emo was dumbfounded. Originally, he knew this thing was deep in the sand, so he was still able to track it down, but now, this shadow appeared to have understood Emo and went deeper and deeper into the sand, until it gradually reached out of Emo's maximum detection range. Emo's spirit sense mark could be felt at most within 50 meters. But now, this shadow went more than 50 meters underground and eventually, Emo lost the shadow completely once again. Emo stood depressed at where the shadow dug down and was very annoyed. He was wondering if he should dig open here and look, but it was too dangerous to dig randomly in the desert. He still had a clear memory of the danger when he almost sunk into the desert. Note 1. Who means fox here? Chapter 107, Underground Desert. Chapter 107, Underground Desert. Emo really didn't want to give up something he had been chasing for a whole day and night. But now, he knew it was hiding underground, and there was nothing he could do. If only he were in the third stage Chi gathering, he wouldn't hesitate to dart into the desert. In the third stage, he wouldn't be afraid of being thirsty because he would be able to use the most important magic of all, water ball art. With the water ball art, he would be able to convert spirit chi into water, and as such, he would never have to worry about dying of thirst. Furthermore, in the third stage, he wouldn't die even if he didn't breathe for a whole month in the desert. Unfortunately, one level difference was huge. This was a milestone. This black shadow was targeting him. Emo came to the conclusion that it was definitely his purple heart vine that attracted it because other than that, he brought the same thing as everyone else. It was only the purple heart vine that other people didn't have. However, this thing was quite sneaky. He could think of killing Emo first before taking his stuff. Then, Emo suddenly thought of something important. He had been chasing this black shadow for a whole day, but why did it only crawl into the depth now? According to its cunningness, it should have thought of this idea long ago. What did this mean? It meant that it could only crawl in at specific locations. Thinking about this, Emo immediately rejoiced. This place looked the same as any other part of the desert, but there were too many mysterious remains buried underneath, including all those ancient cities lost in the flow of time. Perhaps this place was a tunnel towards an underground city, and maybe, the whirlpool he fell into last time was also a tunnel towards an underground city. Sigh. Thinking about it, Emo felt a little disappointed again for not being in the third stage yet. Emo set his gaze on his bag. He still had 10 bottles of water, plus the bag of water the yellow-clothed woman gave to him, and all the pills Emo had made. With these, he would be fine even if he was buried for half a month under the sand. What was he afraid of? He came for the purple heart vine in the desert. Since that thing also came for it, it meant that it had seen it before. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so sensitive. Let's go inside. As soon as Yemo made up his mind, there was no stopping him. He took out a shovel from his bag and started to dig where the black shadow disappeared. Sand flew as Yemo dug deeper, and soon, he was already more than 10 meters in. It was already starting to feel suffocating, but something like that was nothing to Yemo. He was a cultivator, albeit being only in the second stage of chi gathering, he could still breathe internally with enough water. Yemo's digging speed was very fast, and 3 hours later, he had already dug more than 100 meters. His method consisted of digging a big chunk and sending it back before pushing away the two sides. If his bag hadn't been so large, perhaps he would have been 200 meters in by now. At that moment, Yemo estimated that the tunnel behind him should have already been blocked completely. He dug another 200 meters, and his shovel suddenly hit something hard. Yemo felt overjoyed. He should have arrived. This hard thing should be a rock, and as Yemo scanned with his spirit sense, he discovered that it was indeed a big green rock. It was very thick, almost a meter in diameter. Yemo wasn't impetuous. He sat down first and took a pill with some water to recover his chi. He was digging diagonally, so this stone was probably around 200 meters underground. After he had taken an hour to rest, Yemo completely recovered his energy. He gathered the chi into the metal spade and hacked towards the stone. Immediately, rubble flew everywhere. The stone was like mud under Yemo's spade. In less than half an hour, Yemo dug a meter-deep hole into the stone. Just when Yemo crawled into the hole, the sand outside fell into the hole and quickly covered it up. The place Yemo landed was very spacious and looked like a street. However, there was a bad odor everywhere that was weird and indescribable, similar yet unlike of a rotten smell. He followed the street and walked tens of meters while expanding his spirit sense out. Finally, he realized it wasn't a street, but a road made of stone blocks. Yemo carefully walked forward along this road, keeping his spirit sense on the surrounding because he was sure that black shadow also came here. He just didn't know where it was. And Yemo was sure that there were entrances other than the one he dug up, which perhaps didn't even need digging. After walking for a while, Yemo hadn't seen a single house on the side of the road, and instead thought that it looked a lot more like a valley, so it became obvious that this place wasn't some underground city. As if he had just sensed something, Yemo stopped his footsteps, and even though he was a cultivator, he felt the atmosphere around became eerie. A row of huyang tree roots was lined up at the two sides, and what gave Yemo goosebumps was one of the huyang tree roots. He could clearly see with his spirit sense that the root had a metal nail on it, one that had been marked with his spirit sense. His nail had really hit a huyang tree root, and even if Yemo didn't want to believe it, the facts were in front of him, so he had no choice. There weren't such eerie feelings even in the cultivation realm, but here it had occurred right in front of his face. Yemo definitely wouldn't believe that such a huyang tree root could avoid his tracking for a day and night and still move so fast. Besides, that huyang tree root appeared to be anchored there and wouldn't be able to move from this position. Yemo was on full alert as he walked beside the huyang tree root. He studied it carefully with his spirit sense, and realized that his speculations appeared to be right. It seemed that it was really the metal nail that he had thrown, but in order to confirm it, Yemo took out his torch and saw with his own eyes that the metal nail on it really belonged to him. His spirit sense was right. It made Yemo wonder how a huyang tree root could move so fast. He didn't touch that nail and instead went into contemplation. Suddenly, Yemo remembered that 2 days ago, he had hit the black shadow around its shoulder, but this huyang tree root had the metal nail on its upper body. The position wasn't right. Then Yemo found another problem. He saw that this nail had been exposed a bit on the outside. Yemo thought that, with his power, if he were the one to have shot this nail at the root, there was no way that the nail wouldn't be completely lodged inside. All these signs showed that Yemo wasn't the one that inserted the nail there, but it was done later by someone or something else. Who could put a nail in the huyang tree root? Yemo frowned and carefully pulled the nail out. Soon, he found some blood and even a long strand of hair. This nail really was put there by something. He could tell by looking at the hair that the thing that had been hit was probably a monkey-like animal. Yemo found it very strange that there was such animal in the desert. However, he knew that monkeys and apes were very smart, so it was natural that they could think of such ways. When Yemo thought the problem clearly and knew what sort of animal he was chasing, everything became so clear. This animal was not only very smart but also good at running away. There was only one road underneath the desert, and other than the huyang tree roots, there were sand and stone boards. It seemed that a long time ago, someone made this stone block road leading to somewhere, and even specially planted the huyang tree root at the side. Yemo increased his speed and walked along the stone road. He knew that since the shadow could escape here, it meant that it had already run inside. As long as he followed this road, he could chase up to it. However, what made Yemo disappointed was that he had walked here for half a day, but not only did he not see the shadow, he also didn't even know if there was an end to this road. If it wasn't a one-way road, Yemo would have thought that he was lost again. After so long, Yemo estimated that he probably wouldn't be able to catch up to the shadow and felt helpless. The place this thing had escaped to was too absurd, and besides, it was too smart. Yemo didn't bother tracking the shadow anymore and didn't even look at what was on the side. He simply started to rush forward. After another half a day's time and a few turns on the road, there was finally a stairway leading up. However, it wasn't long, only 20 to 30 meters or so. Yemo walked up to it and scanned out with his spirit sense. Then he understood that he came to another open space. However, a huge stone was blocking the entrance. He ran for an entire day around on the stone block road and had no idea which hairy animal had tricked him. This road was probably more than 10 kilometers long but was a bit curly, giving enough time for Yemo to think more thoroughly about this place. Who planted this with huyang trees at the side? Why is that road so long? This was a hefty project. Could a huyang tree grow underground? Yemo wasn't sure if it had grown above the ground before and then sank down. Since Yemo wasn't able to know for sure, he shook his head and walked to the end of the stairway. He moved the stone block, however, no sand fell, which implied that it wasn't covered by the desert. He walked through the entrance and discovered an immense underground desert. However, when Yemo scanned with his spirit sense again, he couldn't help but be immediately shocked. Chapter 108, Re-Encounter. Chapter 108, Re-Encounter. The scene he saw was a desert, but this wasn't the main point. The main point was that it was grown full of purple heart vine. Under the scan of Yemo's spirit sense, there were hundreds of them. Yemo took out the torch and shone it over the surroundings. There was a dense patch of purple heart vine even in the distance. Furthermore, they were even thicker than the wrist. They definitely had been growing for thousands, or even tens of thousands of years. Purple heart vine, although it is the spirit herb of the lowest level in the cultivation realm, it would be very valuable if it was more than 3,000 years old. One could even sell it for hundreds of spirit stones, but now, there's so much here. Yemo held his breath. He was indeed shocked. He did find purple heart vine, moreover, there was so much, and they were all very old. However, he didn't feel the slightest sense of joy. Instead, he felt a faint sadness. What was this? Yemo didn't move. Instead, he closed his eyes and felt with his spirit sense. Indeed, this place was surrounded by purple heart vine. He saw right, but that faint sense of sadness was also real. Suddenly, Yemo noticed a problem. It was that purple heart vine was a spirit herb and they had been growing for many years, making them high-level spirit herbs. However, he didn't feel a sense of spirit chi here. What was this? The purple heart vines still laid across the desert, and didn't even change their shape at all, so even if these purple heart vine had withered, they could still be used for medicine. Yemo walked close to a purple heart vine slowly, and he felt a sense of rotting well up in his heart. He blew lightly, and the 3-meter-tall purple heart vine actually turned to dust. Yemo was stunned. He walked to a few more and blew. These purple heart vines all turned to dust and disappeared. As if feeling the moment of Yemo's arrival, these thousands of purple heart vine all turned to dust. If Yemo didn't see it for his own eyes, he would have thought something eerie happened again. The desert full of purple heart vines suddenly disappeared in an instant. Yemo stood there without moving, feeling extremely bitter. He looked for a long time and finally found the secret of the purple heart vine. However, this secret was useless to him. He had lost his interest of going to Kulu. Since he already found purple heart vine here, there was no point going elsewhere. Plus, even if Kulu had purple heart vine, it probably wouldn't be better than here. Yemo walked into the desert. No one seemed to have come here before. This desert wasn't big, and soon, he reached its end. A huge stone tablet stood before Yemo with the 2 words Ku Lake. So this was Ku Lake. It seemed that Ku Lake, like Luobu Lake, was a big lake but eventually turned into desert. Yemo put his hand on the tablet, feeling a faint sense of disappointment. He didn't get what he wanted coming to the desert. It seemed that he could only return to his clinic and slowly cultivate his silver heart grass. However, if he wanted to do that, he needed to keep a low profile, and Yemo didn't really want that. Even if he wanted to, he already exposed himself in the Taklamakan, so perhaps he wouldn't even be able to keep a low profile. Yemo's thoughts suddenly stopped. He looked at his hand in surprise as he felt a faint sense of spirit chi pass from the tablet to his hand. However, that spirit chi was too weak, almost unable to be used for cultivation. However, even so, he still needed to make out the situation. He just dug out this tablet and cleaned up the dirt around it. A dried-up spirit chi appeared in front of Yemo's face. No wonder there was some spirit chi. It was a dried-up spirit well. Yemo was disappointed, however, because he understood why there was so much purple heart vine here. Originally, there was a spirit well here. This was really a pity. If this spirit well still had water, Yemo would perhaps even want to live here. Although it was dark, it was better than having no place to cultivate. Yemo felt the spirit well inside. He poured down a bottle of water and said, "A spirit well actually doesn't have water, then I'll give you some water." In the desert, perhaps only Yemo would do such a thing. He was a cultivator and had a natural gratitude towards spirit wells and spirit things. Plus, he didn't mind giving this bottle of water. Since he didn't find the purple heart vine, he was about to go out. When Yemo poured the water down the spirit well, something surprising happened. The spirit well actually emitted a thin spirit chi as though repaying Yemo's bottle of water. Yemo felt this and surprisingly discovered that he could cultivate with this spirit chi. Thinking about this, Yemo was no longer stingy and poured all the water he had down, including the bag of water the yellow-dressed lady gave him. As expected, the spirit chi increased a little. Yemo quickly sat down and cultivated. The reason he didn't care about water was that he was in the latter part of stage 2. As long as he could reach stage 3 with this spirit chi, he wouldn't care if he had no water, because at that time, he would be able to use water magic. Time passed fast as he cultivated. Yemo didn't know how long he cultivated for, but it was approximately 3 to 4 days. When he woke up, he found that there was no more spirit chi from the well. Yemo could only helplessly stood up. This spirit well had been dry for too long, and because of that, it wasn't enough for him to reach stage 3. However, Yemo felt his power and discovered he was at the peak of stage 2, just a thin line from level 3. Perhaps in less than 2 years, as long as the opportunity came, he could ascend to level 3. Yemo bowed to the spirit well. No matter what, this spirit well helped him a lot. However, Yemo knew that no matter how much water he had, perhaps this spirit well could only emit this last spirit chi. Yemo didn't know how this place formed, but it seemed that someone intentionally used the desert as a barrier to protect this spirit well and purple heart vines. After eating some simple food, Yemo walked over to the staircase and climbed up another staircase. A few minutes later, Yemo arrived at the bottom of a stone board again. He moved it aside and sand fell, causing a piercing bright ray of sunlight to fall on his eyes. Knowing that he had already come out, he returned the board back before covered it up with sand. Perhaps one day, he would once again return here due to the dried-up spirit well. When Yemo stood in the desert again, he realized he was actually in a patch of forest. However, this forest was dead. There were dead huyang tree roots everywhere. Just when Yemo was thinking if this was the legendary demon forest, a few gunshots interrupted his thought, making him frown. There were gunshots? Did Nanqing's people chase here? But then he thought that even if it were Nanqing people, they wouldn't shoot without seeing him. But soon Yemo understood. A yellow-dressed lady stumbled from the demon forest and dashed to the side. It was the girl who saved him. She had a red spot on her shoulder. She had already lost her bag, and a few men with guns even chased her here. Seeing their ferocious looks, Yemo knew they were from Nanqing. A sense of guilt rose from Yemo's heart. He didn't think that the woman who saved him was hurt due to him and being hunted. This woman not only saved Yemo, but in Yemo's heart, she was also like a goddess. However, now these bastards even dared to hunt her, so he immediately felt the intent to kill. The yellow-dressed lady was stumbling harder, causing Yemo to be quite surprised. Even if she couldn't dodge the gun, these few men shouldn't be a match for her. Why was she like this? He didn't have time to think. Just when Yemo was about to shoot out metal nails, a sudden chick-chick sounded. In the desert, it was rather piercing. This sound was getting louder and louder. Not only did Yemo hear it, but also the girl and those few men heard the sound. All the people looked at the direction of the sound unanimously, and what they saw was a patch of bugs with a disgusting flowery pattern at its back. There was countless ones of them all crawling out of the sand. Immediately, they covered a huge patch of ground, and this was just the beginning. From that small area, they then covered hundreds of yards in a blink of an eye. These bugs had 4 legs and walked extremely fast. The front of their mouths seemed to only have a single tooth. When countless of these bugs suddenly appeared in the desert making the chick-chick sounds, everyone felt a chill ran down their bones even with the sun shining brightly. The 3 Nanqing people immediately reacted and wanted to escape for their lives. However, these bugs had swarmed up. In a few breaths, these 3 didn't even have any bones left. Even the gun in their hands were eaten. The bugs that were involved in devouring them immediately grew larger and blacker. Even the pattern on their backs were clearer. Yemo gasped. He immediately thought of the yellow-dressed lady. She also saw the bugs, however, she no longer had any strength as her eyes reflected her loss and hope. Suddenly, she became really peaceful and just fell onto the sand. Chapter 109 Terrifying Human-Eating Bugs. Chapter 109 Terrifying Human-Eating Bugs. Yemo looked at the swarm dashing for the yellow-dressed lady. He didn't even think before charging at the girl with his fastest speed. Just a few seconds before the bugs came, Yemo carried the yellow-dressed lady and ran. As though discovering that the yellow-dressed woman was saved by Yemo, these bugs were actually enraged, and they all swarmed towards Yemo. Although the ordinary bugs couldn't keep up with Yemo, those thousands that have eaten human flesh evolved to have an extremely rapid pace. They weren't any bit slower than Yemo. Perhaps they were even a little bit faster. However, what made Yemo shocked the most was that these few thousands bugs could actually half fly half walk at their fastest. If they were to eat more human meat, would they grow out wings? Yemo suddenly thought of locusts. If these bugs grew wings and flew out everywhere, then it would be a catastrophe. No one would be able to stop these bugs. Suddenly, Yemo remembered the human-eating bugs in the desert. Were these them? The bag of the yellow-dressed girl in his arms had long vanished. Her hair was messy, and her face cover was slanted, showing half of her immaculate face. Just that almost made Yemo lose himself. When he saw this girl with her face covered a few days ago, he was already astounded. But now that he saw half of her face, he felt even more astonished. There was actually such a woman in the world. However, Emo couldn't care with that now because the bugs were getting closer and closer. With his current pace, those bugs would catch up with him sooner or later. Emo was also getting more and more worried. If a few thousand bugs caught up with him and he was forced to a fight, those countless other bugs behind them would also catch up. Let alone his current second-level chi gathering, even if he was at the third level, he would still get devoured. If he wasn't carrying someone, Emo certainly had the means to escape. However, it was impossible for him to drop the yellow-dressed lady. Not only did he have good feelings towards this girl, but she also saved him. If it were to reduce the load, he could only drop his bag. At this moment, the yellow-dressed lady opened her eyes. Realizing that she was in Emo's arms, she struggled a bit but soon discovered the tens of millions of bugs chasing behind them. She raised her head and saw Emo's face full of sweat as well as the bugs that were closing in. For the first time, she opened her mouth and said, "Thank you? Put me down and save yourself." Although her voice was weak, the crystal clear sound it produced almost made Emo think that he was hearing a heavenly hymn. "Stop saying that. These bugs are so disgusting. If I drop you down, even if you're not scared of death, you would be disgusted to death." Emo knew it was useless to threaten this girl with death. Surprisingly, the yellow-dressed lady seemed to take in Emo's words and immediately stopped talking. Emo felt relieved. Luckily, this girl could actually talk. This meant that she wasn't a mute. After a long time, the yellow-dressed lady said, "I'm Luo Susu." "Luo Susu?" Emo repeated. Why did she have the same last name as his master? But immediately after, Emo heard the chick behind him and replied, "I'm Emo." "Emo," the yellow-dressed lady repeated. Hearing the sound of the bugs which were closing anything, she didn't say anything. She repeated the name as though to remember the person who risked his life to save her, although they would probably will still die in the end. Emo couldn't leave the girl behind. Watching the closing bugs, Emo had no other choice but to drop his bag. He took out 2 bottles of pills, the brush Chiwan Chin gave him, the purple heart vine, and the silver heat grass seeds. Then, after thinking for a moment, he took out another empty bottle before throwing the bag. Soon, the bag was bitten into oblivion by the millions of bugs. However, these bugs didn't even stop and continued to chase after Emo. Without the cumbersome bag, Emo's speed increased a lot, and eventually, it was about the same as the bugs. Emo couldn't get rid of them, but they couldn't catch Emo either. Only Emo knew that with the current situation, he was at a disadvantage. These bugs could run for a few days, but he couldn't. With him carrying Luo Susu, perhaps a few hours later, he wouldn't be able to handle it anymore. He knew that he couldn't go on like this. Looking down on Luo Susu, he discovered that she had fainted once again. However, from her dry lips, he could tell she hadn't drunk water for a long time. Emo felt guilty. She gave him water, yet she was thirsty to such an extent. But at the moment, he didn't have water to give her. Emo really wanted to cut open his wrist and give her some of his blood, but he knew that even if he wanted to, the current situation would prevent him to do so. He was already in a life-or-death situation, and if he was to be injured, he would be giving himself to these bugs for dinner. Emo couldn't continue like this. Suddenly, Hay turned around and stopped. However, these bugs didn't have any intention of stopping. Seeing Emo stop, they swarmed him faster. Emo raised his hand and a few fireballs flew out, exploding amongst the bugs and killing a big patch of them. Emo rejoiced. He didn't think that the bugs in the desert would be afraid of fire. The outer layer of their skin seemed to have been covered in a layer of oil. They had no resistance against the fireball. Emo's fireball was of the lowest grade, so he didn't expect it to be effective. Now that he found a way, Emo was merciless. He continued to throw out fireballs after balls. These fireballs exploded again and again, and countless bugs were burned to death. The burnt bugs emitted a disgusting scent, making people want to vomit. However, these bugs didn't have any wisdom, and they still continued to swarm him. Emo estimated that his fireballs just then killed more than half of the evolved bugs. He wanted to kill some more, but the countless unevolved bugs followed up, and he could only continue to escape. Since his chi wouldn't be able to keep up, remaining still and releasing more fireballs wasn't a viable option. If he didn't reach the peak of the second level, he really wouldn't dare to do this. However, after Yemo's ravaging, only 2,000 bugs that could keep up remained. Yemo ran for a while and stopped releasing another few fireballs. When the bugs behind kept up, he started to run again. Using this tactic, Yemo finally escaped from the horrifying bugs by dusk, but he was almost dehydrated. He opened his parched throat and continued to run for another 2 hours, afraid that these bugs would suddenly catch up. He was terrified of these disgusting creatures. When the sky was completely dark, Yemo found a corroded wall. Without anything in hand, all he could do was to sit by the wall while carrying the unconscious Luo Susu. Yemo knew that the reason why she was still unconscious was because of thirst. However, he didn't have water. After resting for another hour, Yemo felt Luo Susu was really dehydrated. Although she seemed to be strong, but she could very possibly die of dehydration. As such, after thinking it through, Yemo cut open his wrist and pointed it at her mouth. Luo Susu drank a few mouthfuls and actually frowned. She didn't drink anymore, and Yemo didn't force her. After all, he still needed to find a water source. Since Luo Susu was unconscious, he needed to conserve stamina, otherwise, they could only wait for their death. Yemo took the bullet out from Luo Susu's shoulder and fed her another pill. He used his chi to help her soothe her wounds and felt really fatigued. Thus, he slept against the wall with Luo Susu in his arms. When the next day came, the sun shone brightly again. Yemo felt he was fortunate that the Huyang tree root shadow didn't come. Otherwise, he would really be in danger. Yemo had come to the desert for more than 10 days, and the weather was getting hotter. Yemo knew that if he couldn't find a water source, let alone saving Luo Susu, even him wouldn't be able to get out of the desert. Soon, Luo Susu had woken up. She felt she was much better than yesterday, and she curiously looked at Yemo. She wanted to get up and walk herself, but discovered that although she was better, she still couldn't move. Yemo took out a biscuit and gave it to Luo Susu. "Eat something first. Later on, we'll try to look for a water source or a way out." Luo Susu shook her head. At the moment, she didn't want to eat anything at all. She just glanced at her shoulder and realized that the bullet seemed to have been taken out. Seeing Luo Susu look at her shoulder, Yemo was afraid that she would imagine things, so he quickly explained. "I've already taken out the bullet in your shoulder. Sorry, it's my fault. Those people were hunting me." Hearing that Yemo took out the bullet, Luo Susu's pale face unexpectedly showed some readiness but disappeared quickly. She didn't continue talking, and instead closed her eyes once again. Under the scorching sun, the temperature in the desert was over 50 degrees. Yemo didn't want to talk, even he couldn't handle it now. He survived another day, but he was yet to find any water source. He was getting more and more withered. At night Yemo found a cave. Knowing that Luo Susu couldn't hold out much longer, he carried her inside it. Chapter 110 Bitter Well. Chapter 110 Bitter Well. In the wind-corroded caves, Yemo looked at Luo Susu, who was getting worse by the minute. He was very worried, but he has withered himself. If he gave Luo Susu some more blood, perhaps he really wouldn't be able to hold on. Yemo hated why he was just missing that little bit of spirit chi to break through. If he was on the 3rd level now, there would be no problems at all. His mind wandered as he seemed to see that yellow-dressed girl give more than half of her water to him. After a long time, the figure of the yellow-dressed girl appeared to merge with his master Luoing. He could no longer tell if she was Luoing or Luo Susu. Suddenly Yemo woke up once again. He knew he couldn't hold on any longer. But in his mind, he couldn't bear to watch the woman he brought agony die in front of his eyes. Thinking of this, Yemo perseveringly slit open his wrists without hesitation and pointed it at Luo Susu's mouth. Yimo's wounds healed very fast, but Yimo had made up his mind. As soon as his injuries healed, he would slice it open again. He had this deep feeling in his heart that Luoying was Luo's Susu. Otherwise, why would he fall for her so hard? He didn't know how many times he cut himself, but Yimo felt a sudden sense of fatigue. He was aware that he was about to die. He didn't think that he still didn't walk out of this desert eventually. However, more intriguingly was that he died with a girl with surname Luo. Luo Susu, Luoying. Yimo had a smile at the corner of his mouth. He thought that he didn't belong here anyways. Since he was going and could die with the woman he fell for, he was satisfied. The moment he went unconscious, he didn't think about anything. It was just the figure of Luoying and Luo Susu in front of his eyes. One moment, it would be Luoying, another moment, it would be Luo Susu. Then they merged. He didn't want to think. Regardless of whether it was Luoying or Luo Susu, he felt he was satisfied as long as he had one by his side. It was unknown how much time had passed, but when Luo Susu woke up, the moon was high in the sky. The whole cave was shone brightly by the moonlight. Suddenly, she realized that her face cover had been unveiled. Her heart skipped. But soon she found that Yimo's wrist was still at her mouth. The wound had formed a scab. She carefully removed Yimo's hand to discover that Yimo had slept on the sand. He was unconscious. He had his other hand around her waist but still kept a smile on his mouth. Luo Susu eventually understood that she was saved by Yimo. If it wasn't for Yimo's blood, she would have been long dead. Yimo risked his life bringing her out of the sea of bugs and then used his own blood to save her. But why would Yimo save someone he just met? Was it just because she gave a bag of water to him? Other than Lan Yu saving her life, for the first time, Luo Susu felt that she owed the young man in front of her. Although she might not live, but she still felt she owed him, even if she died immediately. Luo Susu had never been so close to a man before, much less being carried by one for 2 whole days and 1 night. The man below her had a pale face, but he was still smiling. She wondered what he was thinking about. Luo Susu extended her shaking hand and felt Yimo's face. Though there was some sand on it, his features were easily distinguished. There wasn't a bit of fat. The moment she touched his face, he suddenly gave her a sense of familiarity. But that feeling felt to be on the brink of existence and non-existence. Something that she just couldn't grasp. Did he die? Luo Susu suddenly felt melancholic. Although she hadn't found Ningqingxue, she still repaid the debt she owed to Lan Yu as she was going to lose her life in the desert. However, how could she pay back the debt she owed to a man who had already died? He used his own blood to save her. Although she was still going to die, she would die after him. Luo Susu couldn't understand why Yimo would save her. She even imagined that when the bugs caught up, Yimo would dump her instead of dumping his bag. If he didn't save Luo Susu, maybe he would still be alive. However, he dumped his bag instead of dumping her. Her heart that never felt a ripple suddenly ruptured for a stranger. Her memory was simple. From the age of 5, she was taken away to study some secret arts. 12 years later, she returned to thank Sister Lan Yu once. The place she was at was the hidden doors. What she learned were the ancient Chinese martial arts. Those from the hidden doors were not allowed in the mortal world. In addition, the place she was at, the peace door, had to stay away from the ruckus of the human world. Thus, only she knew the hardship of her coming to help Lan Yu. Other than repaying her debt to Lan Yu, nothing else tying her to the mortal world. Thus, her memories before 5 years of living were city memories. Eventually, after that, it was hidden door memories, simple and innocent. Although she had a young heart, she would never have any emotional ripples. In her eyes, other than training, there was nothing else. But today, a strange man died for her, and for the first time, she felt moved. Not for anything else, just for his actions. The people from the hidden doors were cold, and only focused on cultivation. No one would risk their lives to save another. But right now, Luo Susu met someone who was willing to give up his life to save her. Perhaps when he dropped that bag, He was already preparing for the worst. Why did he do that? Luo Susu felt that she almost couldn't control her emotions. She couldn't bear Yimo's death. Her eyes were cloudy. She knew this wasn't good for her, but she couldn't hold it. Susu, our way of cultivation is one that requires a serene heart. You must remember not to let anything affect your emotions. Refrain from joy, worry, anger, pain. You must not get too emotional. Her master's words seemed to be echoing by her ear. However, Luo Susu just couldn't control her sorrow. She didn't know how her master controlled herself, but she couldn't even control herself over the death of a stranger. How could this be? Even if she owed him a life and she was about to die, why was she so sad? Suddenly, her heart ached as though all her power was about to leave her. Spew! Luo Susu spewed out blood. Looking at the thick red stain on the ground, Luo Susu's eyes were filled with dim sorrow. Was this the side effects of her cultivation method? She looked down again at Yimo, who had his eyes tightly closed. She still couldn't resist her tears as it fell onto his face and rolled into his mouth. Luo Susu suddenly thought if all her tears fell into his mouth, would he come back alive? Yimo, in a boundless darkness, suddenly saw a clear well. He felt he was very thirsty and he jumped into the well. He drank all the water, but there was very little and it was bitter. He opened his mouth and waited for more of the bitter water. Luo Susu's hand suddenly felt Yimo's heart beat. Although it was very faint, but it was still there. He wasn't dead. Luo Susu suddenly rejoiced. If only she had more water. Luo Susu didn't even think before grabbing Yimo's sword and slitting her wrist too. Blood immediately gushed out and she quickly pointed it to Yimo's mouth. She wanted Yimo to drink, but her blood was too viscous. Yimo couldn't drink it. In desperation, Luo Susu shed tears again. She sucked from her own wrist and fed it to Yimo's mouth. But with just that, she could no longer hold out and fell unconscious as well. Her blood was too thick and in just a moment, it coagulated. Yimo felt that bitter well water suddenly become viscous. His mouth seemed to feel a softness. He subconsciously gulped, and his dantian felt some heat. Yimo was a bit conscious. He seemed to have noticed something and started to cultivate. He was getting more and more aware and was even sure that he was at the edge of a breakthrough. He wouldn't let this opportunity pass. Yimo's chi continued to go through cycles of cultivation. 1 cycle, 2 cycles. That membrane which stopped Yimo from reaching the 3rd level was getting thinner and thinner. Charging and charging again as well. Yimo didn't have anything else in mind. He just wanted to break through that membrane. Luo Susu felt a warmth as well as something that seemed to calm her spirit. She opened her eyes, enjoying that sense. She felt that even if she died like this, she would be very peaceful. She was very grateful towards the young man who brought her away from the bugs, allowing her to choose such a peaceful way of death. But soon, she understood that Yimo's body emitted this sense. Yimo still didn't open his eyes. His face was still pale, but it had more blood than before. Luo Susu rejoiced. She knew she couldn't endure much longer, but if she could save this person, then she would have no regrets. She would have paid back everything and would be able to leave this world without any regrets. Then she had this sense that made her feel close to this man. She couldn't tell why she would feel such way. She slit open her wrist once again and sucked, passing the blood to Yimo's mouth. Yimo was at the critical moment of breaking through to 3rd level. He didn't expect such a thing to happen. But soon, he understood what woke him up. That viscous liquid in his dreams was Luo Susu's blood. That softness was her lips. He felt moved but just didn't know what that bitter water was. Other than his master Luoing, this was the first time Yimo was moved by a woman. He didn't like to shed tears and never did, but now, his eyes felt sore. Yimo wanted to stop Luo Susu's suicide, but he couldn't at this moment. He needed to focus all his effort on breaking through. Only then could he save both of them. Luo Susu suddenly raised her hand and wiped the tear from Yimo's eye as she mumbled, "Sister, you said today is my birthday?" I didn't think I would have my last birthday here. Then, she fell on Emo and fainted. Like Emo, she fainted with a smile on her face. Regardless of whether she could save Emo, she did all she could. She didn't know anyone and could leave without any regrets. Chapter 111, Third Level Chi Gathering. Chapter 111, Third Level Chi Gathering. At this moment, the chi in Yemo's body had reached its max. Finally, he felt a rumble in multiple points of his chakra meridian. Immediately, he seemed lighter while feeling countless new chi forming in his dantian. Everything became clearer. His spirit sense nearly reached a range of 50 meters. Was this the third stage of chi gathering? He held down the joint in his heart, as he suddenly wanted to howl. Countless hopes, and he finally reached third stage chi gathering. Suddenly, Yemo remembered Luo Susu, who was still unconscious in his arms. He thought about the hand she felt his face with, and was struck with another fit of worry. He knew Luo Susu was on the brink of death. Yemo immediately used a water ball magic, and a water ball filled with spirit chi formed in his hand. Yemo put the water into an empty bottle and fed it to Luo Susu's mouth. However, Luo Susu couldn't drink the water in Yemo's hand. Her face was pale and had a smile at the corner of her mouth. Her flawless face was like the goddess from heaven, making Yemo's heart ache. Yemo used another water ball to wash her face. He thought, and started using his chi to help her recover her dried-up life essence. Yemo only forcibly reached third stage in such a bad environment. He didn't even consolidate his power. If he was to help recover Luo Susu, it would be very hard, and with one mistake, he would break all his meridians. However, Yemo didn't care at all. Even if he was going to be useless, he would still save this woman. And there was something Yemo didn't dare to think about. In his heart, there was more than one that this girl and the figure of his master merged together. Yemo's spirit chi flowed incessantly into Luo Susu's body, helping her repair her meridians. If a cultivator were to see what Yemo was doing, he would think Yemo is crazy. A mere stage 3 chi gathering dared to do something like this. This was suicidal. Even a stage 6 wouldn't dare to use his own chi to repair meridians for others, yet Yemo did it when he was a mere stage 3. Yemo was indeed very tired now. He felt he was running out of spirit chi and once again felt the danger of lack of water. However, he knew he couldn't stop and wouldn't stop. Since he did it, he must save Luo Susu. Otherwise, his heart wouldn't be at rest for his entire life. Luo Susu had a long dream. She saw herself fall into a big fire pit as countless fire rushed towards her, consuming her. She felt she wanted to get out, but the fire prevented her. At this moment, a man helped her block the fire and take A to a cool forest. She really enjoyed the forest and didn't feel distressed at all. The annoying things in her body was soothed by the serenity of this place. Other than feeling a little thirsty, she really liked this place. "I'm thirsty," Luo Susu said subconsciously. However, that man who helped her block the fire didn't turn around. She felt his body was shaking. "What's wrong with you?" "I'm a bit thirsty," Luo Susu said once again. She believed that must be a lake in front. She only needed to scoop some water, and she would be able to drink. However, she couldn't move. Finally, the man turned around. His face was pale and covered in sweat. He smiled at her. "Go drink." Then, the man fell over. Luo Susu worried and hurried to hold up the man who saved her and blocked the fire. However, she stumbled and the man had disappeared. She also opened her eyes and felt she was still in Yemo's arms. However, other than feeling a little thirsty, she didn't feel any discomfort. She even felt comfortable, just like in her dreams. What happened? Why wasn't he awake? What happened to herself? She knew her situation. How did she suddenly get better? Luo Susu suddenly felt that there was something beside her hand. It was a full bottle of water. She exclaimed and wondered where this water came from. Why would it suddenly appear here? She couldn't explain it but didn't want to think. She opened the bottle and pointed the water at Yemo's mouth. At the same time, she wiped sweat from Yemo's forehead. Was it he who blocked the fire in her dreams? Yemo finally felt water. He drank a few mouthfuls and opened his eyes. He looked at Luo Susu, who fed him water, and smiled happily. He finally succeeded. Although he used up all his spirit chi and was in a rather dangerous situation, he didn't fail eventually. He successfully saved Luo Susu. And her cultivation would be faster. Too bad she didn't cultivate. If only she could cultivate with him. You're awake! Luo Susu looked with joy at Yemo, who had just opened his eyes. For the first time, she felt that there was joy in this world. Drink some water too, I don't need it. I just need to rest for a bit. Then, Yemo closed his eyes and recovered his spirit chi. Luckily, he was just extremely fatigued and didn't injure his foundation. Luck amongst luck. Perhaps this was good fortune for those who do good deeds. Seeing Yemizuri close his eyes, Luo Susu knew there was no major problems with him, and so she took the bottle and drank a few mouthfuls. It was cool and a faint sweet taste. Water was very tasty. She had never drunk water that was this good before. After drinking, she suddenly realized that Yemo had drunk from this before. But then, she shook her head, she had already kissed him. So what? However, Luo Susu didn't drink much. Although she was very thirsty and wanted to drink more, she still had to leave some for Yemo. And she still wanted to ask Yemo where this water came from. Yemo closed his eyes and started recovering his chi. Luo Susu looked at him but didn't disturb him. She also saw there was a bag of biscuits on the side. She gave that to Yemo and didn't expect him to still have it now. In order to recover her strength, she took one and ate it while waiting for Yemo to wake up. Although it had been more than an hour and Yemo still didn't wake up, Luo Susu didn't seem worried at all, because she could tell from Yemo's breathing, which gradually calmed down. Although she didn't know what chi art Yemo was cultivating, she could tell it wouldn't be worse than the one she used. When Yemo woke up, the sky was already bright and a night passed just like that. He looked at Luo Susu, who had gotten out of his arms and sat on the side, feeling very happy that she was really well. Other than some weakness, her body had completely recovered. What made Yemo surprised and joyful at the same time was that Luo Susu didn't wear her face cover anymore. Instead, she took a bottle of water and looked at him quietly. Yemo saw Luo Susu's out-of-this-world complexion and was actually stunned. However, Luo Susu passed the water in her hand to Yemo. You drink some too, thanks for saving me yesterday. Although she didn't know how Yemo saved her, she knew that she wouldn't be alive if Yemo didn't save her. Yemo suddenly smiled and said, Drink the water first, then we'll celebrate your birthday. However, I don't have a birthday present for you. Tell me, what present do you want the most now? Luo Susu stopped for a moment, but she immediately realized that Yemo must have heard her talk to herself to know that today was her birthday. She looked at Yemo's genuine smile and seemed to be influenced by it. She also became joyful. For the first time, she said cheekily, If the heavens could give me a small pond, even if it was just the size of a ball, it would be my happiest moment now. Then, she subconsciously looked at her body that was full of blood and dirt. She really did hope there was water so she could clean herself. Yemo smiled and said, Wait here for me, I'll be back soon. Then, he turned and went into the cave. Luo Susu looked at Yemo's back and actually felt a faint reluctance for him to leave. But soon she removed this emotion from her head. Her way of cultivation forbade having such distractions. If she did have other thoughts, she may even do damage to herself, much less cultivate this art. So those who cultivate the serene heat art will never feel emotional towards other things. This was also why it was very hard for her to come out. Because as soon as she was tied by the things in the mortal realm, it would be hard for her to progress in cultivation. Luo Susu sighed. She was lost in thought. She had Yemo's blood in her body, and Yemo also had her blood. She was saved by Yemo, and Yemo was saved by her. Was there really no ties between them? But no matter what, she decided to never come out again after she went back. Perhaps she really shouldn't have come out this time. When she went back, she would tell Sister Lanyu that it would be very hard for her to come out again. Then, she thought about Emo. This young man gave her such a deep-etched feeling. He seemed to have this metaphysical yet serene feeling on him. She really enjoyed staying with him, and ever since she woke up that feeling was growing more intense. He even gave her a faint sense of familiarity. That familiarity definitely wasn't because she saved him before and stayed with him in hardship. It was a real familiarity, and that made her feel very bewildered. Perhaps she knew him from their past life, Luo Susu thought. She would never show any feelings towards any man and wouldn't even talk to them. But the things she did for Yemo was way past her bottom line. She didn't even to look back on that. And he was mysterious. He could actually revive her and get a bottle of water. It was as though he would always have a way to do things when staying with him. You're tuning into the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.